Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the ninja of high school DxD. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Rias Grimori was known for many things. Her distinctive crimson locks that cascaded down her back, which marked her as the heiress of the Grimori clan, a household known for their overwhelming magic prowess and their kindness to their servants. Her curvaceous figure, that earned her a permanent spot in all of the guys' wet dreams and the status of one of the two legendary Onisama in all the girls' fantasies, and not known to many but her closest friends, but she was also a major otaku. But if there was one thing that truly defined the crimson-haired beauty, it was her undying commitment to her family's well-being. As both the heiress of the prestigious Gr. Emery household and the king of her own little peerage, she had imposed on herself a duty to ensure their safety. She had worked hard to develop her magic to the point where it was right now. While Issei was not as powerful as her older brother, a man who was commonly given the title of the strongest devil, she was no slouch either. But she knew while she was powerful, there were certain opponents she could not face yet. So when she felt a large, and she meant Satan-level type of large, reserve of magical energy, she did the most sensible thing she could think of at the time and called her best friend and rival, Sona Sitri. Attending the human school under the guise of Sauna Shitori, her childhood friend sat across from her. They were located in a cult research club, a room with a wooden paneled interior with Victorian-styled furniture. Candles were poised and lit at certain points at the room, though due to the occupants' devil abilities, were merely ornamental. Sona Sitri was a bespectacled young woman. With smooth black hair styled in a bob cut, her violet eyes peered over at her Grimori counterpart. Behind both girls, was their collective peerage casually occupying the room. Despite the dark-haired Queen Akano walking around and serving tea to the visitors of the club, the tension in the room was high. The reason for this was the current conversation both the king pieces were having. "Are you sure?" Sona asked. Nudging her glasses up the bridge of her nose, the Ravenet heiress had a slight frown on her face. "Yeah, I'm pretty sure. It only registered for a few moments, but I was able to sense a large amount of energy somewhere in the vicinity of the coup," Rias explained. She could sense the disbelief in her friend's voice. After all, it wasn't every day that someone with magical reserves large enough to rival the four Satans just appeared out of thin air. Rias half hoped that she was wrong, and that everything was just some mistake. Both she knew that was exactly what happened. She had felt it the moment it happened. The overwhelming feeling of hope that emanated from the source alarmed her. The only beings she knew who gave off such a feeling were from the angel faction. But what truly set her off was the wave upon wave of malice. It rolled off its source, and the intense hatred made her shudder to the core. This was why she had called her friend. While Rias considered herself a competent individual who could hold her own against many of the supernatural beings in existence, she knew she had the tendency to fly off the handle and be impulsive. This was where Sona came into play. Unlike herself, Sona was level-headed, cool and calculative at all times. Where she was impulsive and brash, her friend was cool and in control. Sona preferred to make plans and strategies while Rias usually flew by the seat of her pants. "And you claim that this power rivals a Satan? If so, aren't you sure that this is a little out of our league?" Sona asked, and the collective individuals behind them could not help but agree with the student council president's words. Most, if not all of the members were low-class devils whose hardest challenges so far were stray devils. They were certainly not ready to deal with trouble of this magnitude. "I know that. There's no way I would plan to confront whoever caused this. I had already sent word to my brother, and his orders were for us to investigate, observe and report back to him. In no way are we to confront this person," Rias elaborated on her brother's orders. "That is indeed the smarter course of action," Sona conceded. "It most definitely was. However, I don't see the need for such a large contingent. In fact, in essence, it could prove to be counterproductive. Assuming that this entity is neutral in its stance amongst the three factions, as approaching it with such a large crowd most likely will lead to a confrontation." Listening to Sona's words, Rias could see the logic in them. If she were to be approached by such a large crowd, that would undoubtedly send warning bells off in her head. So what do you suppose we do? Drumming her fingers against the desk, Sona allowed a small smile to grace her face. Even though whoever it was that had entered their city, and it was in fact their city, they were obviously strong. But she couldn't keep down the small thrill that she got. This could mean a possible ally or a dangerous foe, but if there was one thing she learnt from chess, not everything was black and white. Oh, the irony. I propose a smaller group should go off EAD and confront our intruder while the others keep at a distance for support. If the person proves hostile, then they can rush in to help those in trouble. With the time limit we have, it's the best we can come up with. What say you? I agree. Then how about this? Tsubaki and Akino, alongside you and myself, will confront the intruder while the others stay a respectable distance behind. With both their statuses as queen pieces, they possess the capability to hold their own should this water down to a fight, Rias explained. This was the wisest decision, she mused. While she is confident in both of the peerages, Tsubaki and Akino were by far the strongest, bar Sona and herself. It also didn't help that both peerages had new members in the forms of Issei Hyodo, Asuya Argento and Genshiro Saji. All right then, if all of this is worked out, we should be on our way. Hi, Baocho Kaichu, were the responses that rang out in the club room. At this declaration, the two groups formed WITH, the two kings and their respective queens taking their own teleportation circles while the others took their own. And in the blink of an eye, they were gone. Naruto Uzumaki was an odd individual. He was the son of Minato Namikaze, the Yellow Flash and Yondaime, and Kushina Uzumaki, the woman revered as the red-hot habanero, who were both ninjas feared by many. Just few minutes after his birth, he was made the third Uzumaki to host the nine-tailed demon fox, making him a Jinchuriki like his mother before him. In his first mission as a ninja, he found himself facing off against an A-Raw NK ninja and a tycoon who had oppressed an entire nation. Somehow surviving the ordeal and liberating said nation, his life became a roller coaster of impossibly hard opponents ranging from a fellow demon holder, hell-bent on killing everyone in the world, and a self-proclaimed god who aimed for world peace by enslaving every living person in an eternal illusion. But being the oh-so-impossible to kill knucklehead he faced it all with only his fists, a shit-grinning smile and a loud datbeo. Through necessity and circumstances, Naruto had to become stronger than all those around him, and he did just that. At age 12, he fought toe-to-toe to a honest-to-God demon and emerged victorious. At 16, he had mastered Senjutsu and was a sage that had surpassed his teacher and godfather. At that same age, he had mastered the Nine Tails power and became the joint strongest person in his homeland. Not only that, however, but he later found out he was actually the reincarnation of Ashura, THSIX Paths, who, up until that time they had met, was considered a myth. So yeah, Naruto Uzumaki was an odd person. But despite all the craziness in his life, despite all life threw at him, he would always come out on top. But it seemed that Kami decided to see how far the young sage's patience could be tested, because there was no way in hell this could have happened without some sort of divine intervention. What is this, you may ask, that has happened to the blonde? I would suppose it would have to be related to the fact that he was somehow flung through a dimensional rift. We could now find he blonde shinobi sitting crossed-legged in the middle of a clearing in a forest. Blonde spiky hair sat on top a rounded face with only a black headband to keep it out of the owner's cerulean eyes. The were three marks resembling whiskers on each side of the teen's face. What was once a orange jacket with black accents was now in tatters, revealing a mesh shirt underneath. Orange pants which stopped head at the shin led to sturdy ankle-height sandals. The blonde's eyes were closed, his form still. What the boy was attempting was an exercise he had learnt from the toads during his training. Eventually, a red pigment shrouded his eyelids, and when he opened them, the usually blue was replaced by a golden hue with a solid black bar. The signs of sage mode. He frowned. While there was no difference in the power boost he received from sage mode back home to the one here, it felt off. Corrupted. Sage mode allowed the user to draw in and mix nature's energy with that of their own, to create a new and more potent energy. With that said, it is correct to assume that sage mode was a reflection of the state of nature. And right now, Naruto felt anger and hatred. While these feelings could be detrimental to most persons, Naruto had quite literally lived with the embodiment of hate for his entire life. Speaking of which, oi, Kurama, you there? The boy asked mentally. Instead of an answer, he found his entire surroundings changing. Gone were the lush green trees that spills out as far as the eye could see, and in its place was a sewer. Naruto stood atop the murky water in the sewer. It wasn't the first time he was here. This was his mindscape after all. His eyes were drawn to the large monstrosity before him. Large, crimson-slotted eyes met golden eyes. With a blood-curdling smile, the giant fox spoke. Yeah, I'm here, brat. But the better question is, where exactly is here? Kurama spoke. His burnt orange tail swung proudly behind him. Honestly, I'm not sure. But it sure as hell isn't the elemental nations. The large chakra construct snorted at the tiny human in front of him. Somehow, I think this all your fault, his deep voice dripped with sarcasm. He had meant every word, however. While Naruto might not have caused it directly, Kurama was sure that these sort of things only happened to his host. No, not host. Naruto was no longer his host, but was now his partner. The kid had said so himself. How the hell is this my fault? For all we know, this could be because of you, Baka Fox. Naruto shouted aloud. This was becoming a habit between the two since the war. At first, Kurama had played it off as Naruto being the lesser of two evils when compared to Madara Uchiha. But now, the ninja could clearly see the kinship they both shared. What did you say, you damn brat? Don't try to pin. Wait, what is it? The fox tilted its head upwards and his right ear twitched. Despite the massive size of the fox, Naruto found the action cute. Which in turn made it amusing. And he failed to stifle his sniggers. Noticing the boy's laugh, Kurama glared, then inwardly pouted when it only caused the boy to laugh louder. Shut up, you've got company. Huh, so we do. Well then, let's greet them. With his piece said, Naruto blinked and opened his eyes. Immediately, he noticed the four women standing in front of him, two of which stood at the forefront and the other two a little further behind. He first noticed the redhead because of her exotic hair color. Blue-green eyes watched him with avid fascination, displayed by her raised eyebrow. A simple strand of red hair stood up in the center of her head, which he likened to a cherry stem. What she wore, he could only assume was a uniform of sort, as the other girls were wearing it as well. A simple red skirt hadn't even passes her knees with accents. Tucked into the skirt was a white blouse with thin black stripes. She wore a black corset above the blouse that accentuated her assets. And what fine assets they were. Beside her stood a black-haired beauty. Donning the same uniform as the voluptuous young woman beside her, she had violet eyes that promised swift punishment on troublemakers, and her whole demeanor screamed disciplinary. The glasses didn't help either. She had a lithe figure, and while not as eye-catching as the girl beside, she wasn't too easy on the eyes either. Further behind her was another bespectacled girl. Well endowed and slightly taller than the others, she also gave off the vibe that minutely reminded Naruto of Iruka. She had her arms crossed under her impassive bust, and an impassive gaze of hazel eyes tried their best to assess him. The person, however, was someone who sent all types of warning bells in his head ringing. She had silky black hair tied in a high ponytail by an orange, hell yeah, ribbon. Just like the other girls, she had a large bust. Just what the hell are these girls eating? Wide and shining violet eyes watched with blatant mirth at the blonde. A small smile on her face that reminded him of the snake mistress Anko. Oh shit. With no idea who these girls were, he decided to take a leaf out of his lazy, silver-haired sensei's book. His eyes curved up into U's, and with lazy wave, he spoke, yo. Quote ellipsis quote. Quote ellipsis quote. This was not what I had expected. The reed head finally spoke, breaking the awkward silence. Rias was dumbfounded really. When her small group had broken through the clearing, they were apprehensive. What she had expected to see was a powerful man, or woman, she wasn't sexist, waiting for them. What she didn't expect to see was a boy about her age meditating. Watching him closely, she noted the red pigmentation over his eyelids. Were they related to his power? There was always the possibility of that. They had stew. There about 5 minutes now and the boy had not moved an inch. If it wasn't for the fact that she could sense the slight stirring of energy beneath the surface, she would have thought he was a statue. But then he suddenly opened his eyes and she couldn't help the raised eyebrow at what she saw. Golden eyes with black bars washed over her, drinking her in. They had shifted from her, to Sona, to Tsubaki and finally to Akino. Where for some reason, she could have swore she saw a hint of recognition. Was this not the first time they had met? Surely she would have remembered him. His looks were quite unique. After what she assumed was a sizing up, the boy then waved and said, "Yo." And this led to the situation they were now in as four dumbfounded girls tried their best not to face palm at the boy's attitude. Surely this wasn't the same person who had given such a strong magic reserve, Rias thought. Unlike Rias who only thought about the question, Sona had asked out loud. While she was a tactical genius, Sona could have already seen that this boy was one who responded to blunt questions rather to cloak and dagger practices. "Are you the one that gave off such a large power source?" Sona asked with a scowl. Her tone was sharp and came off as rude because now that she was near him, she realized that the boy was completely human. She really hadn't expected that. She didn't hate humans. No, quite the opposite. In fact, she admired them to an extent. It was this admiration that led to her attending a human high school, so she could have a sort of guideline when she can go to achieve her goals. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the girl who spoke. It was obvious they weren't normal girls. And now that he thought about it, their energy it wasn't chakra. This had a different feeling to it. This was darker. Sona frowned when she realized that the boy was not going to answer her. Her scowl deepened and she took a step forward, both hands on her hips. "Well, are you gonna answer me?" she asked. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the girl here. "What are you?" he asked before he truly thought about it. "I have no obligation to." Era, Kaichu, Akino interrupted, "It's getting dark out soon. So why not do this somewhere else?" Now that he had finally heard the ponytail girl speak, he finally had an answer to his suspicions. Her tone, her way of speaking, the way she crossed her arms beneath her chest and that devilishly innocent smile that she had on convinced Naruto that he was in the presence of a sadist. And if that knowing twinkle in her eyes were right, she was an experienced on as well. "So what do say Goldie-kun, you look like you need a place to stay for a while," Akino asked. But Naruto reasoned that if it was her who was offering a place to stay, then his only option was to decline. As though sensing his thoughts, the redhead spoke first, "Please, we mean no harm. We just want to ask you a few questions and you would get somewhere to stay in the foreseeable future in return." Sona looked at Rias with raised eyebrows at her friend's offer but Rias merely shrugged. For the entirety of their encounter, she had watched the teen. Even if he tried to suppress it, she could feeling the good energy rolling off of him. Fortunately, it wasn't the same kind of energy that the angels used, so she deemed the boy as a neutral in their stance against each other. Her eyes drifted back to the rook piece she had yet to use in her peerage. Looking back at the boy, there was one thought. And quite possibly, a future ally. Entering Kuo Academy, Naruto Su. Couldn't help but be awestruck at the sight. Trailing slightly behind the four girls, Naruto stopped and gawked at the impressive structure. When he had been told that they were going to escort him to the academy, his mind had quickly imagined the academy back home. Small and cozy, sort of like a home away from home. With a simple teleportation circle carrying them to the gates of the prestigious academy. Those thoughts were dashed in the winds. This was absolutely humongous. Towering many stories above him, the building stood out like only an old pervert in a hot spring could. Loud, brah, shish and practically begging for you to stare and marvel at their boldness. The striking architecture, which Naruto will later learn to be European style, was splashed in beige and brown. Walking a wide path, which then encircled a water fountain and started off again towards the school building, Naruto let out a short whistle. "Man, I haven't seen anything as fancy as this back home," the blonde commented offhandedly. Walking with his fingers interlocked at the back of his head, he lengthened his strides to keep pace with his small escort group. Era, it would seem that Goldie-kun is impressed with what he sees. "Wouldn't you agree, Boucho?" Akino whispered to her king. Akino would like to believe that she knew Rias better than anyone else, even her own family, so it would be obvious foe. Her to recognize the knowing gleam in Rias' eyes. The blonde teenager walking right behind them had unknowingly piqued Rias' interests. The whiskered male was extremely strong if Rias' first assumption were anything to go by. Yet right now, she couldn't feel a smidgen of magic power from him. She had correctly concluded that he was purposely suppressing the entirety of his powers. Yet despite the boy's strength, she noted the carefree manner in how he walked. She saw the small smile on his face and she had feeling the boy was always smiling. And the boy was completely human, making him free. Game to the devils of the occult club as the boy had no affiliation to either of the other two factions. Now, the only thing to do was to convince the blonde to join their peerage. And she had several ideas at the moment. Feeling a sudden chill down his spine, Naruto felt the primal urge to run away from the daydreaming ravenet watching him from the corner of her eyes. It was when the group had just turned down an empty hallway that the blonde broke the silence they were walking in. So, are you girls gonna tell me what you are? I mean, you're obviously not human, and you're leading me into what appears to be an empty school. So I'm starting to think this is some sort of B-list horror movie, Naruto spoke. He even had a scrunched up look on his face as if actually considering the idea the girls were in fact trying to kill him. As I said before Mr. Naruto, he told the buxom redhead. The girl stopped and looked at him to see if he was actually serious when he told her his name. She honestly thought he was. After all, what parent would name their son after a ramen ingredient? Fish cake. The king piece asked incredulously through her small giggles. It was hard not to laugh at the meaning of his name. She couldn't help but think that it would be a lot more amusing if he had some sort of addiction towards the cuisine he was named after. How Cammy would be laughing his ass off at the girl's thoughts. Yep, and damn proud of it. The shinobi grinned, revealing his sharper than normal canines. His whiskers stretched by the grin and his eyes, closed shut, he bore a striking resemblance to a fox. I mean, who wouldn't wanted to be named after the food of the gods? His eyes still shut, effectively missing the winces from the girls when he said that, although, I am pretty sure my mother might have meant my name to mean Maelstrom. What Naruto had told the girl was a half-lie. While he knew his mother had also liked the name because of his translating to bot. The heavenly noodles and the force of nature, she had mainly chose that name based on the main characters in Jiraiya's novel, Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi. Ironically enough, the main character's life had been an account of the prophecy which Naruto himself had fulfilled. Yes, well, Rias coughed in her hands to regain her composure. As I told you before Naruto-san, we mean you no harm. If I dare say, it would be quite the opposite. Rias felt as though the rook piece in her skirt's pocket had gained an extra 100 pounds. Excitement built up in her body and bubbled ferociously at the thought of such a powerhouse joining her peerage. But never had the thought of him being physically incapable of doing so had crossed her mind. You see, the evil pieces system was created by one of the four Satans. Ajuka Beelzebub, used as a way to replenish the devil faction after the Great War had greatly reduced their numbers by allowing members of any of the other races to be reincarnated as a devil. This reincarnation is not absolute however, exceptions to this is that Buddhas, gods or dragon gods are incapable of being reincarnated. Another technicality to the piece's abilities is the amount of power it takes to reincarnate someone. Therefore, Naruto is in violation of both of these rules. The tailed beasts are widely known as massive chakra constructs that wield unimaginable power. While true in this assumption, what majority of others do not know however, is that the tailed beasts are actually fragments of the broken power of the primordial god known as the Jubi, the 10 tails. That means, in the essence of things, Kurama is in fact, a god in his own right. And with Naruto having a permanent link to his power, the boy could be considered as a mortal god. Regardless of his god stature, Naruto would still be near impossible to reincarnated. In his base form, the boy's raw power could be comparable to low Satan class. With this in mind, the amount of power the King Piece would have to wield to be able to reincarnate him would be unattainable to all beings except Ophis and Great Red. So lost in her train of thoughts on how to get the boy to join her peerage, he hadn't realized they had walked the entirety of the school, reached the old school building and was at the heard the loud yell of her newly minted pawn. Issei shouted at her arrival. "Baocho, you're back. We've been worried about you." The boy leapt from his seat to greet his new master. While he was a bit still uncomfortable with the fact that he even had a master, Issei was okay with the fact that he had new friends he could grow stronger with, and that was good enough for the boy. It may also have to do with the fact that since he's been a devil, he's been hanging out with girls that have giant opai. Yep, that was just a bonus. Really. Rias, totally unaware of her servant's lecherous thoughts, greeted the boy with good-natured enthusiasm. "No need to worry, Issei. We're all fine," she informed her brown-haired pawn. The boy had foregone his school jacket, leaving his white button-down shirt wide open to reveal his red undershirt. Black trousers ran the length of his legs, which led to his tennis shoes. "Then does this mean everything is all right, Kaichu?" a male voice asked. Gray eyes peeked out beneath a mop of short blonde hair. The speaker now revealed to be none other than Saji Genshiro, the pawn of Sona Citri. "Yes indeed, everyone, this is Naruto," the student council president pointed to the blonde, whiskered teen who stood beside them. Each member in the room took a long look at the one who had released Satan class magic prowess a few minutes ago and were taken back at his, youthfulness, Yosh. Allowing himself to mentally take a picture of each of their features. Naruto decided that once again, the way of the copy nin was the way to go. Yo, Kaneko Tuju was having an alright day in her book. While nothing interesting had happened, it was far worse from a bad day. The young Nekomata in hiding had just went through a day of school. So as soon as she could, she had fled to the club room and was happily feasting on her sweets when her king fled the room in a hurry. The distress was stamped on her face when she flew past Kaneko. Kaneko could see the distress on Ria's face, but it was when she had returned with Sona and her peerage. He realized how bad of a situation they would be headed into. And she had almost choked on a lollipop when she heard the level of strength of the intruder in which her king had sensed. This was way out of the girl's league, and she was all but ready to openly agree with Sona about her opinion. However, orders from a Satan, even if he's your master's big brother, were to be taken seriously. With their orders in mind, Kaneko and the other members of the support group found themselves in a forested area just a couple hundred meters south of their comrades. Anxiety built up in her and a little fear of the thought of facing such a powerful opponent. But that was all to be immediately washed away when they had received word to return to the club room. Kaneko had realized by then that the intruder was not hostile and had either left or was returning back to the clubroom with them. So it was to no surprise to the first year when the Citri heir had introduced a new person. The boy was a lot taller than her. That was the first thing she noticed. But almost everyone was taller than her. His spiky mop of blonde hair was held out of his eyes by a black headband with a stylish leaf carved into a metallic plate. With a rounded jaw structure, the boy's eyes seemed like an endless pool of blue. Whiskered cheeks and sharp canines gave the boy a feral charm. A tattered orange jacket was wide open to show a mesh shirt beneath. The youth was clad in orange pants, stopping at his shin to reveal ankle-height black sandals. Kaneko stared at the boy, her feelings being topsy-turvy at his appearance. Why? Because despite the fact he was obviously hiding his powers, he couldn't hide his essence. And she was confused at his essence. While she had concluded he was human, he was giving off the distinct essence of a yokai. Specifically that of a kitsune. Kaneko spoke, her monotonous tone capturing the attention of everyone in the room. Naruto head snapped in the direction of speaker. Identif. Yingher is the shortest person in the group, he decided to observe her. Hair as white as snow, it was styled in bangs that framed her face, before running its full length, stopping right above her chest. Twin cat hair accessories pinned at either sides, the back of her hair stopped at the nape of her neck in a bob cut. Amber eyes studied him similarly to the way he was studying her. She was seated in a large couch, with a tray of sweets on her lap. Naruto inwardly blew a sigh of relief when he realized that there was a girl in this world that had normal bust size or below normal in her case. The girl had called him a kitsune. Now while some may come to a similar conclusion like the girl, it would be a big coincidence that she had been able to guess Kurama's species. And in Naruto's occupation, there was no such things as coincidences. Naruto, I'm sensing two different types of energy from the girl there. 2. Does that mean this world has Jinchuriki too? No baka, at least I don't think so. What I mean is that girl has two different energies, but they're both hers. The more dominant of the two is the same energy that the 4 girls have. In fact, everyone in the room has that same foul energy. The second, however, is chakra, the burnt orange Kyuubi explained to his partner. Chakra, are you sure? When I was in sage mode, I couldn't detect any form of chakra in this world. Yeah, I'm sure. The girl has chakra all right, meager as it is. If I were to estimate, I would say she has barely Chunin level chakra. Nothing really special when compared to those we know. I guess you're right. Still, is she the only one able to use chakra here? Probably not. Chakra is essentially hereditary, so her parents should have had chakra, too. But that's not all. Her chakra feels the same as Matabi. I'm guessing she a Nekosho. I've never met one that has a human form before, but that possibility is still probable. Naruto cut the link between him and Kurama in preference of looking at the girl who was still staring at him. Now that he knew what she was, those 2 cat hairpins were amusing. Nay, Neko-chan, my name is Naruto, what's yours? He greeting with a feral smile. Extending his arm out in the signal for a handshake, he was surprised with the steel-like grip that clamored his. While it was nothing like Tsunade's or Sakura's, the girl was exceptionally strong, someone her age and size. Kaneko, she answered again, her gaze firmly on his. Kaneko, a cute name for a cute kitten. If it were possible, the petite girl's deadpan gaze became even more deadpan. Senpai, Kukuku tilde, it would seem our little Kaneko has taken a special liking to Goldie-kun. Or should we call you Foxy-kun now? Oh, decisions. Decisions tilde, what do you think, Boucho? Akano asked in a sing-song tone. Her hand on her cheek and a light blush on her face. Now is not the time, Akano. I believe it is time we've asked Naruto-san some questions. There is no need for so many persons to be her, you can all go home now. Rias told her peerage, and to an extent, those of Sona's. Are you sure, Boucho? Yes, I'm sure. If you believe it's wise to do so, then I'll be going now. See you tomorrow, Boucho. Have a good night, Kiba. Naruto watched as the boy called Kiba vanish away with a red seal as the only evidence, but that too soon faded. At this actions, many of the others left in their own circles. With the exception of a brown-haired boy and a blonde girl, who both walked out the door. With only himself, the red-haired girl and the bespectacled girl, Naruto acquainted Ted himself with the couch under the girl's suggestion. Rias slid behind her desk with Sona right beside her. Her friend and rival now had, what she called, her, president, stare. Whenever Rias found herself under that gaze, she would always feel like a delinquent sitting behind the principal's desk, and it always made her uncomfortable. Looking at the boy's reaction, she saw him simply brushed tee off as though he was used to being in trouble. Clearly her throat, rice more to compose herself. If she hoped to make Naruto a part of her peerage, she first needed him on her side. And to do that, first impressions were important. Of course, their first meeting had been bland at best, but now this would be their first conversation, so she needed to be careful as not to insult him. Unknowingly, he was voicing Sona's thoughts to an extent. While he seemed to be capable of some sort power if his change in eye color were anything to go by, she was still incredulous to the theory of him behind the large power source. But what confused her was Rias' words. She had called him a kitsune. As a childhood friend of Rias, she was aware of the fact that the Nekomata was hiding her heritage. Then the boy had called her Neko-chan. Perhaps the boy was an half-breed. It wasn't too far-fetched for a yokai to be with those of the human race. It would explain the fact that she had thought him to be human. But weren't kitsunes known to be extremely proud? She could not fathom one laying with a human. Oh well, she'll be getting the answer soon enough. So, Naruto-san, will be willing to answer any question we ask you. Sona started the questioning which she deemed a suitable beginner. Depends really, will you be willing to answer any question I ask you? Naruto shrugged. He honestly had no objections towards answering their questions. As long they don't ask anything too personal, and that they answer his questions as well. He had learnt from his godfather that information was a shinobi's bread and butter, and that many had risked their lives to obtain information. Plus, that wasn't the first time he had heard a speech like that. His mind had veered back to his early genin days, at the Chunin exams. He remembered vividly the words of Ibiki Morino, the imposing interrogator. Because, in times, information is more important than life, and on missions and on the battlefield, people risk their lives to get their hands on it. Important information in your hands can be a powerful weapon for your comrades in the village. With those words in heart, Naruto realized the importance and to get it, he would give some to receive his own. And unless if these girls had a way to travel dimensions, which he highly doubted, the information would be useless them. Sure, it would only be fair. Rias answered with a smile. So let's begin with the one I've asked twice now. What exactly are you girls? I know for fact you aren't human. Rias let a small smile grace her face. Shish. He secretly loved it whenever she told someone she was a devil. Their reactions were hilarious when they saw her wings. And perhaps she could impress Naruto-san with her cool wings. Well, you see, Naruto-san, I, along with everyone who you have met so far, are devils. With a slight pause, Rias allowed her wings to appear. Sona, following her friends, also allowed her wings to appear. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the two girls, their leathery wings standing out predominantly. He had half expected some sort of out-of-this-world lie that he could easily laugh off, but the look in their eyes told him they were serious. It was just his luck that he had fallen into this world and the first persons he met were devils. Not to mention a Nekosho who apparently had a human from. What next? An egotist, Ikal jerk face who shot flames from his hands and was named after a bird. PFF, what was the chance of that happening? Huh, that was not what I was expecting. That explains the foul energy I felt emanating from all of you. Rias scowled at her energy being called foul. While it wasn't as pure as the angel's light, their power was not foul. Dark, maybe, just not foul. Yes, that would explain that. Now, Naruto-san, what exactly are you? Sona inquired of the blonde. She too had disliked her powers being called foul but had put that aside as it being due to the astigmatism towards the devil rack. Because of the actions of their ancestors. I'd think it'd be obvious, but I'm human, are you sure? Pretty sure. I'm not all big on science, but I'm pretty sure two human parents lead to a human child, Naruto answered with sarcasm. I see. But can you explain what was the reason why Kaneko called you Kitsune, and why you called her Neko-chan? Sona asked the boy. She had expected the boy to be some sort of hybrid yokai human. If he claimed to be completely human, then what was the whole interaction with Kaneko about? Naruto quickly thought of lie for this question. He had agreed to answer all questions, but the existence of Kurama was personal. He had already suffered years of neglect because of his special situation with the fox, and the Fourth Great Shinobi War had started because Issei and Killer Bee were targeted because of the biju they carried. The chances of shady characters targeting him again was too high a risk. So Kurama would remain a secret. At least until he was able to scope out the range of the inhabitants' ability in this world. With his lie intact, Naruto pointed at his cheeks. Probably because of my whisker-like birthmarks. Kids have been teasing me about it since I've been a kid. Since she had given me a nickname based on an animal, I thought it would be fun to give her back one. Plus with her cat hairpins, I just told of Neko-chan on the spot. I see. Forgive me for my assumptions. It's okay. The blonde laughed off. His voice took a much guarded tone, however, at his next words. It's not the first time I've been accused of not being human. But girls decided to immediately drop the matter as they could only see it leading to personal issues that the boy would probably not reveal to them. It wasn't as though they were best friends, and while Rias was interested in the boy, she also remembered that he could still be a possible threat to them. I see. Then would it be safe to assume that you have no affiliation to any of the factions? No. Ticking the boy's confused look at her words, she took his ignorance as a yes. She began to explain the three factions. The angels, fallen angels and devils, which were considered myth to majority of the human population, were actually real. Many years ago, all three factions had a massive war now commonly called the Great War. It took many lives from all three factions, and at the end of it, all three factions had lost. The angels had lost many of their fighters, but noticeably of this number was their leader, God. Yes, God had indeed died in the Great War, but not many were privy to this secret. The devils too had lost many of their numbers, and all four of their leaders, the original four Satans. The fallen angels, however, while not losing any of their instrumental leaders, had lost too many members of their already low numbers to continue the fight. With the damages suffered to all three forces, a peace treaty was formed. The resulting treaty was shaky, at best. While there hasn't been any large-scale fighting since the treaty was formed, there were small-scale squabbles every now and then. There were other factions out there as well, some including the yokai faction, the Greek faction and the hero faction among others. Nodding his head along to the large bit of information, Naruto could now say his ability to find himself stuck right in the middle of a son of the weirdest situations. Just a while ago, he had just finished fighting a primordial goddess which major children issues. Now trapped in a new world with beings thought were only myth, he found himself between warring factions with an unstable treaty. Just my luck, excuse me. Nothing, he waved off Rias' concern. With that cleared up, I have a question to ask Naruto-san, what is your exact purpose of entering Kuo? Sona asked. So far, the boy had indeed provided them with answers. Now she needed to know what his purpose of entering Kuo was. The boy had no knowledge of the faction's existence, so he wouldn't have known that this area was under the Grimoire and Citri household. But that did not automatically mean the boy had good intentions. Honestly, I have no intentions. In fact, I don't really know what for me to go back to where I came from. Since I've appeared here, I have no home, no work, I have nothing really, Naruto elaborated as to inform the student council president of his intentions. Or his lack thereof. Number way back. Since I've appeared here, excuse me Naruto-san, but you speak as if you've just fallen out of the sky or something. Would you please explain how exactly you had appeared in our town? Rias asked the boy, befuddled at his diction for explaining as to why he was in Kuo. Well, you see, saying that I'd fell out of sky wouldn't be so far because that's what exactly had appeared. You see, fingers crossed in a familiar hand sign, while a teen shrouded in golden chakra shouted a familiar yet new phrase. Sexy reverse harem no jutsu. In a puff of smoke, the blonde boy disappeared and in his place were several men. Several handsome naked men. The reaction of each person involved in this monumental showdown was clearly noteworthy. Sasuke Uchiha had a deadpan gaze as he observed the scene. Stupid. Dope. Wait a second, is that supposed to be me? Sakura Haruno however had completely different thoughts. How? GHT in between being angry at a teammate for using such a ridiculous technique against a goddess, or praising him for his flawless execution. And if she didn't know any better, that one guy there looked a lot like Sasuke-kun. Kakashi Hatake watched on with pride. While he detested the technique because he could live without seeing a bunch of guys' junks, he applauded the perversion it took to develop such a technique. Noticing one of the males who looked eerily like his wayward student, Kakashi had never before wished he could unsee things like he would now. The most unpredictable ninja indeed. Who would have thought that such a perverted technique would ultimately save the world? Jiraiya-sensei, are you watching? You would have been so proud. However, it was Kagaya Otsutsuki's whose reaction was the most interesting. The horny, saw what I did there primordial goddess could not look away. Added to this fact was her wielding the Byakugan in both eyes and a Rinne Sharingan on her forehead. This image would be fiercely seared in her mind forever. Not able to recover fast enough from the deadly technique, she could not react fast enough to block Naruto's follow-up. This is the history of shinobi, bitch. With his loud battle cry, Naruto's fist plowed into her cheek, sending her flying off towards Sasuke's direction. By the time she had righted herself, both reincarnations of her Gr. Ansons had already closed the distance between her and them and were swiftly approaching from both sides. With no options other than to dodge, the woman flew upwards, not noticing that Sakura had anticipated this move. With a chakra-enhanced fist, the pink-haired Kunoichi punched the woman back towards both Sasuke and Naruto, in the meantime, breaking both of the woman's horns. careening back towards the boys. She could not stop them as they both laid their hands on her. And she was helpless when she heard those dreaded words. 6 paths. Chibaku Tensai. Kagaya watched in dismay as chunks of earth rose from the ground and converged on her. She had no control of her body anymore. She glared at the 2 boys with tears in her eyes. In front of her, she saw Hagoromo and Hamura Otsutsuki, her sons. Their images faded to reveal Ashura and Indra Otsutsuki, her grandsons. Their images soon again faded to reveal the ones who defeated her. Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha. Yet again, I, the origin of all chakra, am defeated by chakras that are created from but a part of me. Why? Hagoromo. Hamura, I hate you, you belong to me. No, no, I won't allow it to end like this. You Ashura's reincarnation. I hate you the most. Your interference have cost me my cradle. You will pay. Before her Rinne Sharingan could be fully sealed off, Kagaya used the most of her chakra reserves to create a interdimensional portal behind Naruto, and before he could react, a blast of chakra struck him in the chest, pushing him through. The blonde ninja gone forever. Rias stared at the blonde for what felt like an hour. Trying to wrap her head around the grand tale, Rias concluded that the boy was great story because that scene seemed like something ripped right out of a manga. Well, yes, thank you for answering our questions, Naruto-san. However, there is one more thing I would like to clarify, Rias spoke, a charming smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Sure, what is it? You mentioned saying you having no home or without any idea of what to do next, am I correct? Yes, Naruto shifted as he began to feel uncomfortable. Rias, what are you getting at? Sona questioned her friend with narrowed eyes. Nothing, Rias said while pulling out the rook piece and placing it on top of the desk. Sona's eyes widened at the implications while Naruto's furrowed in suspicion. He could sense same energy from Rias emanating from the chess piece. I'm just offering a deal that would help with both of those problems. You see, Naruto-san, there is a special system that allows us to turn other species into devils. And this rook is a part of this system. If you join my peerage and become one of my servants, I can guarantee you a nice apartment, and you'll be serving me so you'll have something to do. Now, don't you agree? That is tempting, but I'm gonna have to say no. I'm nobody's servant, Naruto reasoned with Rias. Naruto, while being a loyal shinobi to the Hidden Leaf, he always had a problem with following orders. Plus, with the fact that he was scorned as the demon brat in his childhood, becoming a devil would put a bad taste in his mouth. I hope you reconsider my offer. If you become a devil, think of all the things you could do. You could get a lot stronger plus live a very long life. Plus, it's not uncommon for a devil to have a harem. Just think about it. I'm sure you'll want to take me up on that offer now. Rias tried to appeal to the disinterested ninja. No, I'm sorry, but my answer is still no. Naruto rose from the couch and stretched his limbs. In his eyes, this meeting was over. Maybe he could find a nice clearing in a forest somewhere. And he could probably look for a job too. Yep, that was the way to go. Naruto thanked the girls before forming a single hand seal and in a puff of smoke. He was gone, leaving only a swirl of leaf in his wake. Rias slumped back in the chair, the chess piece twirling around her fingers. Not the best start, but it isn't over yet. Naruto groaned before sighing in relief as he stretched upwards, arching his back slightly. A deep breath, and the blonde was slowly bouncing on the balls of his feet. All around the team, all the eye could see was foliage and the small forest creatures that scurried along their way. The sun had long since risen and the shinobi's internal clock told him it was probably an hour or so before noon. The dimensionally misplaced shinobi weighed his options of what he could do for the day. His only knowledge of this world had rested on what the girls had told him yesterday. But he had realized that the world worked similarly to his own, with the exception of powerful ninjas just jumping around the place. He could always head back to the red-haired girl. That idea came and went in a split second. Sure, he could possibly learn a bit more about this world, but the girl's offer had rubbed him the wrong way. The way she made light of him giving up his humanity as though she was discussing the weather made him wary of the girl. Plus, she had told him that he would have to become her servant, which was something he would not be doing. Naruto was incredibly loyal, and one had Obi when the person you considered to be your best friend was a broody Uchiha with family issues, but that was only to his precious people. Haku had made realize this fact, and if there was sliver of chance that he could save a friend in need, he would go that extra mile. But the fact of the matter was that they were not friends. Acquaintances, at best, so Wuto resolved to not meet with the girl for a while. So with that option out of the way, Naruto reasoned that the best course of action for now was to explore the town and if possible, hunt a job. When he really thought about, Naruto never really had a normal life. He had been kicked out of the orphanage when he was younger and only a year later, had been living by himself. At age 12, he had graduated the academy and have been working as a ninja ever since. He had never not had a job since he was 12 years old. Unlike the civilian children who had gone to civilian school and such, he had decided to kick ass and take names later. And rescue a few princesses along the way. While that was cool back home, it wouldn't really help him with the problem he had now. Namely, lack of money. And with the fact that he felt as though his stomach was gonna eat him inside out. Lack of food was another one to the list. The blonde shinobi ran a hand through his spiky hair, before he looked down, dressed only in his mesh undershirt, his orange pants and sandals. He knew he had another problem to add to the ever-growing list. Lack of clothes. Midday found our protagonist walking carelessly down the streets of Kuo. Now wearing a white shirt and black pants he had liberated from a clothesline, Naruto fiddled with the hem of the shirt. He had been walking around for about 15 minutes and he now closer to finding a job than he was at the start of his hunt. That was due to the lack of jobs in the area and the fact that he had little civilian skills. He wasn't a repairman. Evidence to this was the state of most of his appliances in his apartment. He wasn't the world's greatest chef either. If anything, he was at the bottom of the barrel. He had always chosen to dine at Ichihiraku's whenever hunger struck him or heat up a cup of instant ramen. Not to mention his dislike for anything that involved paperwork. Sure, he had wanted to be Hokage, but he was no fool. He had often seen the old man's work pile. He had planned that when he became Hokage, he would hire someone smart like Shikamaru to do the paperwork for him while he went out and kicked ass. And no one could complain because he was the Hokage, for crying out loud. How the old man hadn't thought of that eluded Naruto. Just some of the perks of being on top. But being Hokage was only a pipeline dream now. Oddly enough, Naruto wasn't depressed by that fact. Reason being, he had already achieved what he wanted to achieve by putting on the Hokage's hat. At first, he had only wanted the position to gain the acknowledgement of the village that had ostracized him. But he had gained their favor with his effort against pain. They had celebrated his victory and the demon brat had become the hero of the leaf. But with age, the affectionately dubbed knuckle-headed ninja had matured somewhat. And with newfound maturity came newfound reasons. He had resolved to persevere for the sake of his precious people, to protect them and their dreams. And he had done just that with Kagaya's defeat. So all he could hope now was that the 5 great ninja villages had moved on under the banner of peace. Lost in his musing, he had realized that he walked the entirety of his town and was now on the outskirts. His brow raised in slight confusion. He was sure it was just past noon, so why was the area so dark? In the middle of small dirt path, trees grow tall, and bent over slightly to create an ominous atmosphere. No sunlight could penetrate the thick foliage, with the only light coming from the house perched at the end of the path. What seemed to be a simple cabin. The wooden construction was aged. The wooden panels that made its exterior were discolored, and the roof of the porch was rotten, with small pieces of wood fallen scattered along the. He had decided to file the uncertainties away for now until he had more information. A slight rustle caught his ear and the ninja was immediately on guard. He had remembered Rias' words when she had explained the 3 factions. She had explained that there were other supernaturals that existed in this world, some which had assimilated into the human world without detection, so he had concluded that this meant there were other beings who just made it on his people who needed an ass-whooping Uzumaki-style list. Not very creative, but no one was gonna complain in the middle of a beatdown. Crouching slightly, the teens flickered from side to side to see if he could get a glimpse of whatever it was that was watching him. Oh, he knew they were there, somewhat of a sixth sense D picked up throughout his years in his line of work. The only problem now was finding them. A few minutes passed and the presence retreated. Naruto allowed his guard to lower a little, but now the shinobi was interested. Allow a small grin to grace his features. Naruto could feel the familiar sensation of chakra building up and surging throughout his body. Despite his recently concluded battle with the rabbit goddess, he couldn't wait for his next fight, and knowing his knack for outrageous situations, he wouldn't have to wait long. This was something he had blamed on his Uzumaki blood. Staring at the cabin in the distance, Naruto had a gut feeling that whatever it was in the cabin, he was bound to be dangerous and interesting. And considering the fact that it was millennial-old giant chakra that occupied his gut, he was inclined to agree. So with his destination in sight, he set off to the creepy cabin in the woods. Foreshadowing much. All it needed know was a large sign that read, "Creepy shit about to go down in here. Come right in." Naruto winced when onto the porch. Normally Naruto was one to forego stealth and decided that the upfront and personal route was the best way to go. Why cut out the middleman? He would say, but the whole vibe of the place had put him on edge. So when the floorboards creaked under his weight, he was slightly frustrated at his apparent lack of what was considered to be a ninja's way of life. Now he cursed himself for not paying attention in Iruka's class. Slowing his breathing, Naruto took another step onto the deteriorating porch. Hearing at the small victory at being able to mute the creaking sounds, he ventured further towards the door. The door frame had rotted, and the knob a rusty piece of metal that was once gleamed in gold. Entering the cabin and closing the door, he only managed to keep his lunch done at the last moment. The repugnant scent hit him like a freight train and he stumbled backwards. While he was no Inuzuka, he had a sensitive nose. He gritted his teeth and traversed further into the rank house. A single bulb dangled overhead, and Naruto wished it hadn't. Each of the walls were marred with blood splatter. The disgusting smell had now been identified as the half-eaten corpses lying around. Who the hell did this? Naruto was no stranger to death, but the nature of these murders were abnormal. Almost as if it were not human. With that last statement, Naruto's theory of this being one of those supernatural beings had been proven. His eyes narrowed, shifting over the walls, the upholstery, and to the staircase in the left corner of the room. With one hand held over his nose, the boy went up the stairs slowly, his guard set for what creepy crawlies that lurked here. The upstairs was worse than the room downstairs. With no light, Naruto could barely see further than his hands. But not only that, but the strange presence from before was back. Shifting into his stance, waiting for whatever it was to make the first move. Naruto had faced off with many opponents in his lifetime. A fellow Jinchuriki off his rockers, a self-proclaimed god who was his long-lost cousin and a sibling student. And let's not forget the rabbit goddess who wanted to return her cradle back the way it was. And what conclusion did Naruto draw from all this, you might ask? It was the fact that weirdos or early powered beings flocked towards him in numbers like he was a beacon of light. So when he saw a spear made apparently OT light, he had cursed his luck yet again for this cruel ability of his while leaping backwards. But it wouldn't have been very Naruto style if it were only one person he was fighting now. No, not one bit. It was only his battle-hardened senses that saved his life as he sittest. The second spear that would have impaled him had he not moved. It seems our prey has a little fight in him. Don't you agree, Andres? A chilling voice spoke out. It seems so. But that makes it a whole lot more interesting, Tilda. So there were two of them. The presences had hid back into the dark as soon as they had appeared. Naruto could have easily picked up on their location if he went into sage mode. But with the time it took to achieve the state of heightened abilities was too long and left him wide open for an attack. Fortunately, or unfortunately depending on who you asked, the blonde had another ability to fall back on. He could sense their hate, their malice, and it sickened him to the core. Whoever these two individuals were, it was obvious to see that they needed to be put down. And he would gladly oblige. Patience was never Naruto's strong suit, so it wasn't a surprise when instead of waiting for the, whatever the hell they were, to attack, he had charged forward. Approaching the one closest to him, He blurred out of existence before the sound of bones cracking under pressure could be heard. Allison snarled as he was perched high up in a tree and observed his new prey. His raven hair fell to his shoulders and dark eyes filled with sick amusement wandered the prey's frame. The prey had a startling hair of a golden spiky tips. His body was lean and muscular, and he couldn't wait to sink his claws into the prey's flesh. Allison loved to kill. It was what drove him out of heaven. His bloodlust was staggeringly high, even compared to the common loony type in Grigori. But ever since the Great War, Azazel had become peaceful and had ordered the attacks to stop in sake of the treaty. Needless to say, Allison didn't like that. But despite the fact that Allison wanted nothing more than rip into another devil or angel or human or even his fellow fallen angel of thy stood in his way, the gap between his power and Azazel's was like the ground to the sky, so he had bided his time, knowing soon enough he would get what he wanted. How right he was. When news had reached his ears that a group from Grigori had apparently broke rank and went against Azazel's orders, Allison knew this was his chance to get what he wanted. With the higher-ups having their attention elsewhere, it was fairly easy to leave and send base on the outskirts of Kuo. Now, Allison could hunt all he wanted. Humans, devils or anything that crossed his path, he considered game to his hunt. Surprisingly, the prey had sensed him. His crouched stance and guarded demeanor was the tell-tale sign that the prey had fought his own share of fights before. He raised a brow at this. Perhaps a sacred gear. It wouldn't be unheard of. Those pesky little tools being wielded by such weak beings was almost laughable. Allison decided that this prey was different, so for now, he'll retreat. Allison's trench coat fluttered in the wind as his black wings carried him towards the cabin he used as base. The man wore a black coat thrown over his gray button shirt and black pants. He touched down on the porch and entered to the cabin. Greeted by the decaying bodies of his past preys, he couldn't help the grin that tugged at his lips as he thought of adding another to his pile. "Andres," he shouted. A few beats later, a tall man fumbled down the stairs. Like his companion, Andres also had raven hair, but his was spiky where Allison's was silky. His violet eyes gleamed with unsatisfied lust and carnage, and Allison knew that look in his friend's eyes. "Don't worry, Andres, we'll be eating like kings soon enough." This was supposed to be an easy kill, where the prey resisted but would easily be dominated. And with his last breaths, he would beg for death's sweet release. What Allison had not expected was for his prey to fight back and prove a challenge. When the boy had leapt out of the way of the first spear that Andres had thrown at him, Allison had contributed that to luck on the boy's part. But when he has sidestepped the thrust of his light spear, Allison was wary of the prey. But when he had blurred before vanishing from sight, Allison was caught flat-footed and the sounds of his jaw being broken echoed throughout the cabin as he was lifted into the air by a high kick to the chin. Righting himself mid-air, he noticed the prey was gone. "Allison, behind you," his partner warned him, and he turned around to face the infuriating prey, only to be introduced to the boy's fist. Momentum proved true as he body shot to the ground, before smashing through the floor and he landed in a loud thump on the first level. Andres had seen enough. When the boy had landed, he wasted no time to create a light spear. But combatants stared at each other from across the room. Several seconds that felt like an eternity to both. It was Andres who made the first move. He unfurled his wings, a single pair of black feathers, before he shot off at the boy like a coiled spring. With a quick thrust, the intention was to skewer the blonde through the head, but not all went as planned. The blonde shifted his stance slightly, allowing the spear to barely miss his head. Pain exploded throughout Andres' body. The boy's fist had plowed into his abdomen and the fallen angel doubled over the offending appendage. Stumbling backwards, he gasped for breath. "You damn bastard, I'll kill you," Andres said between breaths. He had collapsed to his knees and he still couldn't catch his breath. Yeah, Naruto drawled. "I'll like to see you try though, so bring it, Featherface." Instincts took hold and the blonde jumped upwards to avoid the charge of an enraged Allison as he broke through the floor. The man's hair had bits of splinters sticking out and his eyes seemed to burn with the intensity of 1,000 suns. How dare you? A member of such a weak race. How dare you lay your hands on me?" The man screamed. All rationality and Reason had flown out the window when he saw his prey. No, the boy was no prey. But that sure as hell didn't mean he wouldn't kill him. His hands raised high above his heads, Allison cackled loudly. Be honored, boy, and wander in the afterlife, knowing that your end was at the hands of the fallen angel, Allison. Massive reserves of light filtered from the man into the area above his head. If Naruto were to judge, the man had high Chunin reserves of weight. What was the energy they used here? Sure, he knew that most of the abilities these persons possessed were due to their race. But what did they actually call it? A good question for a better time. Like when you're not trying to dodge a giant light spear. Snapping from his pointless banter, Naruto turned his attention back to the fallen angel. Allison now had unfurled his wings, the two pairs of black appendages. Above his head was spear twice as large as Naruto. The roof of the building had been destroyed as to accommodate the weapon. Now die, you pest. Allison watched with satisfaction as the spear shot at the boy in impressive speeds. The blue weapon of destruction was cylindrical in shape and pointed at both ends. Golden rings surrounded the points, and glistened as they neared the boy. Naruto watched the spear near him, no doubt with the intent of running him through. The boy didn't move, not yet. There was something he wanted to test right now. Moving quickly, the boy caught the spear. The energy construct weighed no lighter than a pin, but he could feel the condensed energy in the weapon. Now to see if his theory could work, he channeled Kurama's chakra into the weapon. And surely enough, the spear changed from a blue hue to crimson red. Grinning at the odd look on Allison's face, Naruto grinned. Wah. When? How? Allison glared at the infuriating blonde. Everything this boy did defied what was the norm. He was human yet he deeds and abilities. He was supposed to have been the prey yet Allison could clearly see who was in charge of the fight. Now, not only had he stopped the man's spear, but he somehow changed its property. The new weapon hummed with more power than Allison could ever possess. This boy was supposed to be an ant. Nothing more than dust beneath his feet. Yet, he proved a better fighter than Allison ever was. And he wouldn't stand for it. He swished his 4 black wings and bomb-dived the blonde, intending to headbutt him into oblivion. Sounds stupid, doesn't it? But stopped short when he fought himself impaled on his own spear. Blood filled up his lungs. He coughed and blood splattered onto his killer's face. The blonde's face was stony, shifting from the usual loopy grin to barely concealed rage. It's the ones like you that pisses me off. I'm doing the world a favor by getting rid of you. And I'm taking you with me. Allison smiled to reveal bloodied teeth before grabbing hold of Naruto. Now unrest. Naruto lurched as another spear found residence in his gut. Eyes widen in shock at his sudden impalement, Naruto couldn't hold back the snarl. Ha ha ha. If I'm dying, then, you're coming with me, Allison cackled in his fit of insanity. He had gotten one up on his prey after all. Despite his doomed fate, he was satisfied. That was until he realized the lack of fear in the boy's eyes. Sorry to disappoint ya, but I'm not ready to die just yet, Ibeo. He watched in morbid fascination as the boy pulled the spear of him before it too turned crimson red. The gaping hole in his stomach flashed orange before skin knitted back together, and in a moment, he was as good as new. Guess I should have told that I healed fast. Must have slipped my mind. The last thing Allison saw was a sphere of blue energy. Rasengan. Azazel liked to think he was a very wise man. Despite the amount of time Barakiel called him a perverted idiot, he knew that somewhere deep down, the man truly believed he was wise. At least, he hoped so. So when he was tracking down 2 of his misguided subordinates and them having to fight a rather particular human, he decided to observe than to intervene. He was rather surprised that the boy was outclasses both fallen angels. The boy was efficient, and besides his weird verbal tick, Azazel was sure he had found a diamond in the rough, and perhaps, something more. That was until the boy was stabbed. A light spear through the gut was enough to finish some of the most powerful devils. He sighed. There goes a great new project. This was his fault, he rationalized. If he had stepped in when the boy was still alive, then perhaps he could have saved his life. Azazel approached Andres. With the latter shaking slightly in fear, he formed a light spear, one trick pony much, Azazel thought, and threw it at his boss. Azazel shook his head at the young fallen angel and grasped the spear. Moving faster than the boy could react, Azazel had already dealt with the wayward subordinate before Andres could have blinked. Having made light work of Andres, Azazel could only raise a brow as the seemingly dead blonde struck Alloson with a ball made of energy. Well, dye my hair red and call me a Grimoire, I'll be damned. Azazel soon found out why it was stupid to frighten an adrenaline-pumped shinobi right after a fight, as he soon found himself on the receiving end of Rasengan. Slurp. Ah, that's the spot, sighed a now well-fed Uzumaki. Setting down his 20th bowl of ramen, the boy turned to person who had treated to his meal. The man had dual coarse hair, coarse black with golden bangs. Violet coat buttoned to reveal his bare chest, it fitted well with his gray trousers. So, why'd help me? The blonde blurted out, after he had promptly shoved a Rasengan firmly up the man's posterior. The man, whose name Naruto had yet to learn, had shrugged of the attack with slight difficulty and explained that he was no threat. He sent as far as to offer the boy lunch, and Naruto, having not yet eaten since sometime before the fight with Kagaya, immediately complied. With led them to their current situation. But why wouldn't I help you? Seeing that we don't know each other, I say I have a lot of reasons of why not, Naruto deadpanned. Good point there, kiddo. The man laughed loudly, and for a moment, Naruto was reminded of his late mentor, Godfather Jiraiya. May his pervy soul rest in peace. With a lot of beautiful young girls. Yeah, the old pervert would love that. Well then, the reason is that you've caught my interest. It's not every day you find a human capable of taking down two fallen angels. With that in mind, I want to acquire your services. Naruto immediately went rigid. He had originally wanted a job before he was sidetracked, and here one was being offered to him. He might have graduated at the bottom of the class, but he was no fool. So what's the catch? Now, don't be so paranoid. What's your name? Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki. Okay Naruto-kun, like I was saying, no need to be so paranoid. All I need is a bounty hunter, Azazel explained to the boy. His golden bangs bouncing slightly as he drained the ramen bowl of its delicacy. Bounty hunter? Naruto asked. Precisely. You see Naruto-kun, this two you fought were actually subordinates of mine. Now don't look at me like that, they're strays. A few days ago, I had a problem when a few of my charges decided to harass a young girl. Pretty little thing, I'll give her about 5 more years before she really blossoms. And when that happens, Azazel trailed off as he realized the weird look that the boy was giving him. Unknown to the man were the rampant thoughts of the teen. Oh sweet merciful Kami, why am I forever cursed to be around perverts? Ahem. Yes, well, as I was saying, ever since that incident with girl, more and more of my charges have been going against my faction's wishes. I'm one guy, and it's only a matter of time before they start a war. So with your help, I'll be able to stop them before they go out of hand. I see, Naruto replied, still absorbing the brunt of the information. From what he had understood, this was sort of like his ninja work. Getting paid to kick ass, sign him up. You've got yourself a bounty hunter. On some conditions, Naruto negotiated. Name them. First, no eternal servant charade. I get to quit whenever I want to, done. 2. I'm kind of homeless, Naruto sheepishly admitted. No problem kid, consider it done. Finally, you provide me with the gear I need. An amused grin made itself known on the man's face. My pleasure. Naruto stood up and brushed himself off, with Azazel doing the same. It seems you've got yourself a bounty hunter. But it is kind of important to know what to call my new boss by. Just call me Azazel. Azazel this could be interesting. Sona Citri sighed for W. Hat seemed to be the millionth time today. In fact, with the amount of time the girl had done said action, it seemed to become more commonplace than breathing. It was understandable why she felt like this. Her life was not like normal teenage girls. The attractive figure that had gained the Citri heiress the spot as the third most popular girl, being beaten out by her childhood rival and said rival's servant, in Kuo Academy, now had an unusual aura around her. To specify, the cool beauty of Kuo had an air of resignation about her, like a person at their wits' end. And it all started with T. the foreboding message she had received from her older sister this morning. Not unlike Rias, Sona was also the second-born of her family and would not have received the title of heiress had it not been due to certain circumstances. In a situation eerily parallel to her childhood friends, her older sibling had left the family name in the process of becoming one of the 4 Satans that ruled the underworld. The former Cetri named Seraphal had risen to the rank of Satan and taken the title, Leviathan. In another weird similarity between herself and Rias, Sona's older sibling was also a full-fledged cis-con. Yes people, Yo Seraphal Leviathan, the strongest woman in the underworld and one of the 4 Satans, was a cis-con. The woman held nothing back and went the whole 9 yards whenever in the presence of her precious little Sotan, as she had taken to calling her younger sibling. That being said, it was understandable that when her older sibling had sent a message, Sona had expected to hear the usual migraine-inducing voice of Seraphal. She was startled however, when her sister addressed her in a way befitting someone of Seraphal's status, and it irked the younger devil. Her sister was known for her quirkiness. Seraphal acting without her weird tendencies and avid cosplaying was unheard of. But that was exactly what had happened this morning. But when the topic of her call had sunk in, she knew why Seraphal had behaved that way. Because it was all related to the Phoenix Grimoire marriage proposal that Rias had been ensnared in. Her best friend was shouldered with the responsibility of carrying on the proud Grimoire name. The family which had gained prestige back in the days of the old Satan faction and had only risen in prestige after the political yet romantic marriage of Lord Grimoire and Lady Bale. The uniting of the 2 households had led to the Grimoire clan gaining the power of destruction, a weapon that was so revered that many backed down due to the fear of combating its wielders. But as a consequence, she had become a prize in the eyes of many others. And unfortunately, one such person was her fiancé of an arranged marriage. The red-haired beauty was forced into the marriage contract for the good of family and her faction. But the man she was slated to marry was an obnoxious prick with an ego a mile wide. He saw his future bride as nothing more a trophy to be won. And he planned to score indeed. The sick bastard. But Rias had vehemently protested against the contract, wanting to marry of her own free will into a man she was in love with. Despite not getting to break the contract, she was able to delay the wedding until the time she had left college, giving her ample time to plan a strategy to get out of the contract. Or so they had thought. Her sister had called to inform her of the Phoenix family's appeal to have the wedding pushed forward and commenced within the month. They had reasoned that the wedding was bound to happen, so why wait a few more years? The entire appeal was hinged on the question, why delay the inevitable? A simple selling point but efficient enough to convince Lord and Lady Grimoire that the wedding should be pushed forward. And if the downtrodden face on her friend in front her was anything to go by, she had heard the news as well. What do you intend on doing, Rias? Sona asked. Her divided attention flickered between the chess match before her and the myriad of emotions crossing her friend's face. A quick maneuver and her Black Knight had taken a bishop from Rias' Crimson Army. Rias' brow furrowed, in concentration as she tried to think of a way out of this doomed situation. Her blue-green eyes narrowed in concentration and her nose scrunched up in focus. Whether she was thinking about the chess match or the proposal, she wasn't sure. Moving her pawn to a susceptible position, she baited Sona in a trap. I'm not sure, she admitted, her voice dejected. She was banking on the time given to her to be used to her advantage. She had thought that perhaps with a strong enough peerage, she could be able to stand up and fight for what she believed was her right. I have no idea what I'll do. My parents have already agreed to the Phoenix's appeal and Sirzex is uncharacteristically quiet on the whole matter, Rias explained before she sighed. It's obvious to see that the diplomatic route is long gone and the only thing I can come up with is challenging Riser for my own hand, Rias finished in a defeated tone. While she despised the guy to her very being and every single molecule shudder in disgust when his lustful gaze would settle on her, she had to admit that Riser was a formidable opponent. And with her time suddenly cleaved, she couldn't see herself defeating the blonde Phoenix with her current strength. Oh, Sona raised an eyebrow. You plan to have a rating game. Are you sure that's the best idea? Focusing back at the chessboard, Sona ignored the obvious bait that Rias had dangled in front of her. Before capturing her opponent's rook with a fluid motion. To be honest Sona, I have ran out of ideas at this point. It goes without saying that Riser is exceptionally gifted when it comes to rating games while I have no experience whatsoever. Not to mention how our peerages rank up against each other. The numbers alone put us at a disadvantage, and not to mention he does possess some formidable pieces. Rias slumped back in the chair she now occupied. The girls were alone in the student council room, seeing as though Sona had dismissed them for the time being. What are your chances? Sona inquired before effectively capturing another piece in an elaborate ploy. Rias grimaced at the board before she thought to answer the question. Since the first move, she had been dominated. While she knew she couldn't compare to the mind that was the C3 heiress, she was no slouch either. Perhaps it was the shitstorm heading her way that was throwing her off her game. But she digress. They're not looking so good. I had expected a lot from Issei, but so far, his combat skills are abysmal. He's really trying his best and I appreciate the effort, I really do, but it's just not up to par. Asia, on the other hand, seems to have the potential for magic, and her twilight healing should come into play. I see. Sona nudged her glasses further up her nose. She didn't need any form of report on the other members of Rias' peerage, having already met them. And to be brutally honest, Rias stood little to no chance of a victory. The situation is unfavorable, that much is certain. Rias visibly deflated at this, before Sona added her last 2 cents in, however. Not impossible. If you can find a way to strengthen your peerage before any date is set, perhaps you can turn the tides. Rias perked up at this advice. It was a rather obvious route to go. She knew that by now, the time for discussions had come and gone with the time for action at the forefront. And what do you suggest for me to do when you say, strengthen my peerage? Rias asked, her attention completely off the game, having realized she had already lost the game. With a predatory smile on her face, Sona finished the game with a checkmate using her rook to trap the king piece. Rias' eyes never left that rook piece. A powerful rook indeed. Azazel thought himself to be a simple man with simple needs. He wasn't high maintenance, nor did he care for the usual flair and extravagant things that many high-ranking fallen angels sought after. No, he wanted none of that. His needs and wants were far more simple. But for some inane reason, he has always denied what he desired. He had lusted after a female, a human, one might add, but for this sin he had been cast from heaven. He wasn't sore over it, not in the least. He had desired a nice little group that could bring protection for him and his fellow fallen, but in its stead, he found himself commandeering a faction with about as many holes as the Titanic. With Rainier's little stunt a while back, he had gotten heat from both the devil and angel factions. Nothing to really worry about, but enough to make him realize the need for a warden of sorts. To detain the strays he had flying about. But, if there was one thing Azazel desired most of all, was a nice fishing partner. He had originally hoped that Valley would fit the bill, but the vanishing dragon wielder had not held back his distaste for the activity. Azazel saw the boy as a surrogate son of sorts, and was saddened to hear the boy refuse his offers on multiple occasions. Add in the fact that he had suspicions that Valley had secretly allied himself with another faction, it had only disappointed him more. So when his new bounty hunter had quickly jumped on the OPNG with him, he was slightly surprised. The boy was fun to have around, that much was for certain. His good-natured, carefree attitude was contagious, and Azazel found himself wanting to spend more time with the youthful youth. Blonde. Added to the fact that Azazel had yet to see the extent of the boy's powers despite the amount of things he had seen the boy pull out of his ass. I mean, cloning yourself. That was unheard of. On Naruto's end of things, he had simply enjoyed Azazel's company. The man was incredibly strong, and on the shinobi scale of power, the man would easily make cage-level standards, which only a few could boast. But not only was the man strong, he was brilliant. He thrived in the strategic aspect of warfare as easily as he strived in the other. The fallen angel had also resurrected in Naruto a sense of nostalgia. The more time Naruto spent with him, the more he realized how much he had missed his godfather, Jiraiya. The dual-haired man resembled his late master persona, Liddy-wise so much that Naruto had taken to calling the man Ero Tenshi, much to the man's annoyance. While the man paled in comparison to Jiraiya's perversion, not that many could, come on, the man was a self-proclaimed super pervert. Azazel had his own level of lewdness, proven by his uproaring approval of Naruto's sexy jutsu, which in retrospect, was quite creepy. He does know that it's still Naruto, right? Right. So here the two were, relaxing in a small boat with their fishing lines bobbing lazily in the low tides. Naruto donned a breezy, white button-down shirt with black slacks and black sandals. He had foregone wearing his forehead protector, having chosen to settle here than to return to the elemental countries, which was a decision that Kurama had wholeheartedly agreed to. He had settled quite easily, with Azazel's aid in return for the boy's services. His companion, on the other hand, had dressed more traditionally, wearing a gray kimono with white accents. "Pleasant, isn't it?" Azazel commented with half-lidded eyes. While the man was a great fighter, he was peaceful by nature, preferring to diffuse a tense situation through words rather than his fists. "Sure, Aro Tenshi," Naruto quipped, and inwardly laughed as a tick mark popped up on the man's temple. It was amusing to see Azazel get worked up over Naruto's nickname for the man. In the end, Azazel chose to just accept the fact that Naruto was by far the most powerful, hard-headed idiots he had ever met, and seeing how he had met Seer's ex Lucifer, it was quite an achievement. "Laugh it up, ya brat." Azazel B. eaten before he adopted a much more serious tone. "But all business aside, I have to thank you, kid." "What for?" When news had spread that I had hired a bounty hunter, it was needless to say that most of the other strays had come running back, begging for mercy. "You did me a huge favor and saved me from a lot of boring meetings if my subordinates had went on to do something stupid," Azazel explained to the boy, who gave him a curt nod. Naruto gave a vulpine grin, exposing his sharper-than-normal teeth. One of his hand had instinctively went to scratch the nape of his neck. Even after his fight with Nagato, he hadn't gotten used to persons paying him praises for his work. He just loved helping others out, and it was a bonus that he got to kick ass while doing that. "It's nothing really," Naruto admitted. While he liked the bounty hunter business, his spirits had dampened when he had realized there wasn't anyone who could force him to truly fight at his best. "Nothing," he says. Azazel gave out a loud laugh. Good. However, regardless of your current success, there are one or two still out there. How do you feel about a job tonight?" Azazel teased, knowing well enough that the boy will no doubt agree. "So tell me where." Naruto grinned before relaxing into the lounge chair he was in. He would relax as much as possible now, because he had a feeling something bad will happen tonight. Naruto dodged a charge before leaping backwards as a light spear whistled to his position. He narrowed his eyes, glaring heatedly at his opponents for the night while wondering how in Kami's aim he had yet again got caught up in another situation that started out simple enough. It had all started out as a simple, disable and capture, mission. Easy enough, right, wrong. For you see, when young Uzumaki had arrived at the location that his target often frequents, he was greeted by not one, nor two but 5 fallen angels. Still easy enough. Well then, how about you try on 2 devils for size? Yep, that's just how unlucky Naruto was. While he was certain that he could still handle the extras without having to use Sage Mode or Kurama's chakra, he had to worry about his actions on a political standpoint. He was hired by Azazel, the Governor General for the Fallen Angels. But these weren't fallen angels. He had no idea how the superiors for the Devil faction would react to him attacking their subordinates. There was always the possibility that they were stray devils, but he wasn't sure if they were. So with no idea of who they were, Naruto resolved to do his job and leave the devils for another time. Slowing his breathing, Naruto studied the situation he was in. All forms of attack had stopped momentarily as the combatants were locked in a standoff. One of his targets was behind him, clutching a light spear in a defensive position. 3 stood shoulder to shoulder in front of him, attempting to burn a hole through his head with their glares. His eyes shifted upwards, as 3 figures floated in the air, annoyed features visibly etched in their faces. He could tell by their wings that 2 were devils, their leathery appendages differing from the feathery ones of his initial target. Muddy brown orbs burned in rage as Carlyle glared at the boy before him. He knew who he was, he would be an idiot not to. Azazel's new lapdog, he had mentally dubbed him. The boy Ad barged into the abandoned warehouse. He offhandedly wondered how many abandoned warehouses there appeared to be and disrupted their business with the pair of stray devils. The minute Carlyle had seen the boy, panic flooded his body and he immediately attacked, praying he could end the boy quickly. It was not to be so, as the boy seemingly vanished from his eyesight before reappearing right in front of him. His hand cocked back and a haymaker met with Carlyle's cheek. All of this happened within the span of a few seconds, and the entirety of Carlyle's party were caught off guard by the boy's sudden appearance. The confrontation between the two had been enough to snap them out of their stupor before they had retaliated. Random attacks fueled by unholy and holy elements alike caused Naruto to be dodging and blurring from place to place. The lack of pattern and the unpredictable nature of the attacks had caught the shinobi off guard, if only for a moment, before he had once again regained dominance of the fight. The standoff had ended when the shinobi's hands blurred in between hand signs, and with a low whisper, he said the last words that the three fallen angels in front of him would ever hear. Wind release. Wind cutter. It was like a switch had been flicked, an ephemeral spark giving way to blue ethereal energy flickered to life. The air itself seemed to have stilled as to the B-rank jutsu being executed at the hands of a master. The blue energy converged into sleek blades of wind, dozens in numbers and gleaming with rampant desires. Then they attacked. The black winged angels screamed in agony as the jutsu carved into them with prejudice. Their eyes writhed in pain, and the sclera pronounced as their irises rolled to the black of their skulls. Their bodies were swept up by the wind before falling like a sack of potatoes. Carlyle watched with wide eyes as three of his comrades were obliterated by weird hands, gestures and words. Whatever magic this man possessed was formidable, but he would not be cut down here. With a loud war cry, he dive-bombed the blonde, while his comrade behind him and taken to throwing his spear ot. The spear closed in with fright, ending speed, but the man made no actions to move out of the way. Instead, he stared at Carlyle. Carlyle stopped short when he noticed the man's hand formed another of his weird hand gestures before a wave of nausea hit him. A loud squelch and Carlyle found himself a shish kebab to his comrade's spear. Somehow, the man had been able to swap places with him, taking himself out of harm's way. Sneaky bastard, were Carlyle's last thoughts. A swift chop to the neck and the last fallen was out like a light. He turned his attention to the two devils in his presence and voiced his concerns. "What am I to do with you two?" he asked the shell-shocked devils who had just watched their fallen angel associated being taken out like the weekend trash. Before they could answer, however, a feminine voice rang in their ears. "No need, Naruto-san, they are mine to deal with." Rias Grimori had walked the entire day with an air of depression around her. School had ended and her talk with Sona had sparked some ideas. It was not lost on her what Sona had suggested for her to do. But the fact of the matter was that since the day they had first met, she had not seen the blonde boy. His presence could spell her freedom from the contract. Riser may be strong, but he was no match for a Satan-class opponent. But how to find him, she thought. So lost in her thoughts, she had not noticed her peerage's concerned stares until Akeno had nudged her. "Come on, Boucho. We should get going," Akeno said. The girl had lessened on her teasing tendencies when she had heard of her best friend's predicament. While Hino had slightly envied her friend for her nice childhood, she did not want her best friend and king to be put in such a situation. "Yeah, you're right, Akeno," Rias conceded. She had to put the blonde enigma at the back of mind. There was no guarantee that she would meet the boy before Riser came, nor was any guarantee that the boy would join her peerage this time around. He had already refused once. She resolved to stop worrying about why she didn't have and instead focused on her peerage. Her loyal family who stood by side, and fought for her sake. She couldn't help the warm smile that tugged on her lips as she looked over her cute little peerage. From Kaniko's monotonous expression to Kiba's princely features, she absently noted how Asia's innocent smile differed from Akeno's devilishly innocent smile. And she suppressed the giggle as Issei practically drooled at Akeno. This was her own little family, and she would fight for their freedom from Riser's greedy clutches. Her resolve steeled, she joined her peerage in their little circle before a red seal appeared below and above them. Then they gone to deal with a pair of stray devils. "What in the world?" Issei correctly summed what they were all thinking. The brown-haired devil had prepared for a fight with 2 stray devils, but instead there were 5 more persons than expected. Fallen angels at that. A painful memory of Yuma, no, Rainier, had shot through his head. Glancing towards Asia, he realized she had experienced the same. But before the shock at the added numbers could really sink in, they were swiftly dealt with. A blonde blur took them out with brutal efficiency. He killed the first 3 with some sort of wind magic before swapping places with another to impale him with his friend's own spear. The last one had got off lucky, Issei thought, with him only being knocked unconscious. Akeno licked her lips in delight when she saw the blonde fighting. While she would have preferred him to cause a bit more pain to the fallen angels, both for personal and carnal reasons, she could not deny his power and immense battle presence. He had dominated the fight, and showed little mercy, except to the last fallen angel. No need, Naruto-san. They are mine to deal with, Rias explained to the shinobi's question. Akeno, if you would. Wasting no time, Akeno had drawn on her magic reserve, before golden seals appeared in front her outstretched hands. Lightning sparked and roared to life, shooting off towards the pair of stray devils. The Ravenet blushed up a storm at their wails and screams, getting off on their pain. By the time she was done, they were nothing more than charred corpses. Kukuku, I guess I overdid it, wouldn't you agree, Boucho? Akeno commented, her cheek cupped in her palm. Era, if it isn't Foxy-kun. I've missed you, Foxy-kun, how have you been? Akeno asked. Just fine, Naruto answered, and like an afterthought, he added, damn sadist. Akeno merely giggled at the boy's woe. RDS while Rias' eyes narrowed in suspicion. She had known that the boy was not normal, but his presence in the supernatural world was not what she had expected, not after his refusal of her offer. Why are you here, Naruto-san? And why would I tell you that? Naruto grinned. Oh, if there was anything he loved, it was antagonizing others. And persons like Rias were his favorite targets, they had the best reactions. I'm only asking this once more, why are you here, Naruto-san? Rias asked while shifting into a fighting stance. This in turn had set of a chain reaction with her peerage members who also prepared for a fight. Whoa, calm down, I'm only joking, Naruto raised his hands in surrender. Then you wouldn't be opposed to following us back to the club room as to prove this? Rias asked, suppressing her smirk at how she had caught the boy. While she doubted he was a threat right now, this did allow her another shot at persuading the boy to join her side. If all worked to plan, Riser had another thing coming. Oh yes indeed, Akeno Himahima was not the happiest of campers at the moment. Her anger threatened to soar to unimaginable heights and her seething rage promised havoc to anyone or thing in her path. Yet, she kept it all bottled under a small smile and deceptively sparkling eyes. She moved with grace that betrayed her mood, swiftly maneuvering around the room a tray in hand and a small cup of tea atop the silver object. Bowing slightly, she set the tea in front of the blonde boy she had met a few days ago before moving to stand beside her master, her SM. Ill wavering when she caught sight of him. Why would the girl be so angry at the moment? Perhaps it had something to do with the bound and gagged fallen angel tussling around in vain efforts against his binds. The fallen angel was a lean teen, with short-cropped black hair. With a round face and wide coal-like eyes, the boy couldn't be more than their age. A large trench coat, not unlike the one Danesek wore, hid his figure so Akeno couldn't get a read on his build. His arms were at his side, with surprisingly strong yet thin wires wrapped around his torso and bound him at the feet. To top it all off, shoved his mouth was what Akeno had assumed to be his captor's dirty sock. The reason for her current feeling was the fact that the fallen angel was still alive. She gritted her teeth in frustration as she watched him tussle and shift, increasingly annoyed at his muffled screams and wanting nothing more than to turn him into charred meat. She despised his kind, her kind. In her opinion, all fallen angels were scum. They were despicable beings who cared only for themselves and no one else. Not even family, and she knew about that firsthand. A hand clamped around her wrist and pulled her from her venomous thoughts. Looking at the person with the offending appendage, she was surprised to see her best friend's sympathetic smile. The heiress tightened her hold momentarily, convenient. To her friend that she understood how she felt. Akeno smiled at the blatant concern in Rias' eyes, and once again thanked the lucky stars that it was the Grimoire family who had found her after her mother's passing. On the other side of the room, Naruto sat in the couch, tilting the cup towards his lip. The warm liquid trickled down his throat, and the teen let out a satisfied sigh at the taste. While it was nothing compared to the ambrosia that was ramen, he had always had a liking to tea, probably something he had picked with Jiraiya. He closed his eyes to savor the taste before opening them, prepared to confront the situation at hand. He was cautious about what might come of his meeting with the heiress. He had seen his fair share of meetings of the same nature throughout his career as a ninja. So he knew that anything could happen, so he had been quick to be on guard. Not to mention that he hated things like this. Any type of meeting usually bored the teen. Hell, the only reason he had agreed to follow her was due to the town being in her territory and how it could potentially affect the treaty to refuse a meeting, seeing that he was temporarily contracted to the Fallen Angel faction. Looking at the girl, Naruto admitted to himself that he was wary of her. His last meeting with the girl was still fresh in his mind, and while she was forthcoming with answers to his questions, her offer had sent a tingle down his spine. She made light of such a weighted decision that it honestly set the boy on edge. While he didn't hate her, in fact, there were few persons who the shinobi could say he really hated. He was not necessarily fond of her. Simply put, he had a neutral front towards the devil. The tea was lovely. He began with a simple compliment, sensing that this would be a good way to start things off. He got a smile in return from the girl whose name slipped his mind. "I'm glad you think so, Foxy-kun," Akeno commented, momentarily forgetting about the unwanted guest who was still wily at the boy's feet. "I am glad you like the tea as well," Rias interrupted. "Akeno really tries her hardest and it's good to know she's appreciated." "I see," Naruto replied. "If it's okay, could we begin with what it is you would like to ask?" Inwardly, Rias frowned. She had hoped that maybe a little small talk would have made it easier to usher the teen into the conversation and perhaps endear him to her, making him a susceptible target to recruitment. She sighed. Getting the boy on her side was proving far harder than she was accustomed to. Akeno had joined due to her lack of choices otherwise. And the same could be said about Kaneko. Kiba, while similar to the first two members, had joined to get revenge on the man who had killed his friends. The last but not least was Issei. The guy was just a raging pervert. Nuff said. Naruto, on the other hand, was not like any of the other cases she had dealt with. But while he was making it harder, she knew he would be worth the effort. So for no, she would play along. "Before we do that, Naruto-san, I believe introductions are in order, seeing as though you haven't formally met my peerage," Rias propositioned with a small smile, not allowing Naruto to dictate the pace of the conversation. "What an excellent idea, Boucho," Akeno commented. "Well, Foxy-kun, my name's Akeno Himehima. But you can call me Master Kukuku." Naruto visibly shivered at Akeno when she introduced herself. He couldn't stop the flashbacks of Anko when she had nicked his cheek with her kunai and proceeded to lick the wound, reveling the taste of his blood. Repressing those memories to the back of his mind, Naruto nodded at the girl now dubbed Akeno. A tug on his shirt sleeve and Naruto was surprised to see the cat-themed girl sitting beside him. While munching a bar of chocolate, Naruto wondered if the girl was related to the Uchiha, if her stoic face was anything to go by. Then he remembered that her hair was white, not black. "If I remember correctly, you're Neko-chan," Naruto greeted the diminutive figure tugging on his sleeve. "Kaneko Tuju, first year," the girl commented while pointed to herself. Her eyes narrowed. When she pointed at our blonde protagonist, Tem-senpai. Naruto visibly deflated at the girl's description of him. He was not a Tem. Damn it. A soft chuckle drew his attention away from the Nekosho beside of him. With blonde hair a few shades lighter than his own, Naruto could effectively say that this person was by all means a pretty boy. He was a head shorter than Naruto, with a small SM. Eel that Naruto noted did not reach his eyes. The boy wore the standard black striped white shirt of the academy with black trousers. A black bow was tied around his neck and a sword rested against his hips. "Good evening, Naruto-san. I'm Kiba Yuto, a pleasure," the boy offered a small nod with his greeting. "Naruto Uzumaki, nice to meet ya." It was at this point that the pawn of the Grimoire peerage decided to make himself known. Jumping from his seat, he grabbed a stunned Asia by the hand before dragging her towards the newcomer, earning a small eep from the girl. "Oi, blondie, I'm Issei Hyodo, future harem king. And this is Asia, welcome to the club." Sometime during the introduction, he had grabbed Naruto's hand, and was shaking it to the chagrin of Asserting that redhead. Rias was not too pleased by Issei's impromptu greeting, as she was hoping that a sense of professionalism might appeal to the powerful teen. She was, however, slightly surprised when the blonde responded with a wide grin of his own while greeting the energetic boy. This was a small insight to the blonde's persona that she filed away for later. "Now that you're all acquainted," Rias interrupted what seemed to be a budding bromance with a few coughs, "I believe you have some questions to answer, Naruto-san." "Sure." Rias smiled at the boy's cooperation. While she knew he was extremely powerful, probably to rival someone of her brother's class, she got the sense that he was, well, sorta naive. With this in mind, she had taken to using certain liberties she knew she might not have had, knowing that the shinobi would not lash out in a fit of rage. A dangerous gamble, but it was paying off so far. She leant forward, emphasizing her sizable bust, and interlocked her fingers underneath her chin. "As I've explained before, Naruto-san, Kuo is in the Grimoire Citri territory and is therefore under my jurisdiction. Therefore, I simply cannot allow unsanctioned confrontations to occur in said area." Then Rias herself winced at the tone she was using. "Well, I don't see a problem here," Naruto replied. He had realized what the girl meant when she said, unsanctioned. It would appear that a condition of the treaty between the three factions was that Party A had to report to Party B if they entered Party B's territory. "My actions are sanctioned. I'm not quite sure I understand what you are saying, Naruto-san. I have no recollection of myself nor Sona being informed of whatever business you have in Kuo." Rias narrowed her gaze. "If you are lying to Mama, calm down, Grimoire-san." Naruto waved off the girl's suspicions. "While it's not surprising that you don't know about my reasons here, I can guarantee you that I am indeed sanctioned." And it was true. When Naruto had first started working as Azazel's bounty hunter, the fallen angel had taken certain precautions to protect the blonde from political backlashes that could result from his actions. The first was to officially contract the boy to the fallen angel faction despite his race, thus giving the boy the backing and protection of an entire faction. The second step would have been to inform the one in charge of the territory as per treaty. But due to the nature of the work, Azazel had decided to forego that decision. Instead, he had opted to cut out the middleman and head straight to the one in charge. Yep, you've guessed it. Azazel had informed none other than Searsx Lucifer. When the Crimson Satan had heard of the situation, he had immediately granted Azazel and Naruto permission to do what was necessary. On the condition that no devil was harmed. He had sympathized with the Governor General, knowing that if the stray fallen angels were to kill any devil in that territory, their fragile treaty would be null and void. And neither men wanted a war. Akeno frowned at the boy's words. She agreed with her king, he was making no sense. When she had met the boy a few weeks ago, she was sure he was not aware of the supernatural world. Yet now, he was claiming to have permission to operate in Italy without neither heiress knowledge. Excuse her if she was a bit confused. "Pardon my interference, Naruto-san," Akeno said. Her usage of Naruto's actually named to show her sincerity. "You claim to have been sanctioned, yes?" At the boy's nod, she continued, "Just who was it that sanctioned your stay?" Yuto pulled out a crumbled wad of paper from his pocket before he looked over its contents. "Not sure, some guy named Searsx Lucifer. That's what it says here." Rias' eyes widened at the mention of her big brother. As the leader of the four great Satans and one of the two known super devils, Searsx's interference with any problem usually meant something was up. And with Naruto directly involved, there was no doubt that something was up. And she wanted to know what. And why would my big brother directly intervene? What could it be that drew his attention? "I'm sorry, but that doesn't concern you," Naruto answered. He didn't want to involve the heiress due to Searsx's condition that no devil was to be harmed while he did his job. With this in mind, Naruto resolved not to involve any devil. especially not the younger sister of the devil's leader. But Rias did not see it this way. In her mind, something big enough to gain the attention of her big brother was happening under her nose, in her territory. Yet she was being kept in the dark. She was livid. I disagree. It does too concern me. Rias glared. Naruto mused as Rias glared at him. Her blue-green eyes seemed to glow in Naruto's eye. DLY wondered if Rias had laser beams in her eyes, would his forehead be seared? This led to outrageous images of laser-wielding flying devils going around and shooting stuff. Would they go? Phew. Because that would be cool. Right, back to the story. Naruto shook his head yet again at the girl. It would seem he was saying, no, a lot to the girl. Standing up and hoisting the fallen angel. Who was still struggling? When will this guy learn he won't escape? Naruto made for the door but came to a halt when he realized what was happening. Standing in front of the door was the one Naruto came to know as Kiba Yuto. What was surprising however was the way the boy stood. With his legs apart and coiled, the boy held his sword casually across his chest. A neutral stance, Naruto noted. Perfect if the boy chose to either go on the defensive or the offensive. But it was a fighting stance nonetheless. I don't believe this discussion is over, Naruto-san, Rias commented from behind him. The girl had risen from her seat. A stern facade washed over her features. Slightly behind her however was a startled Akeno. The queen of the peerage was shocked at her king's actions. While Rias and herself were powerful in their own extent, she believed that Foxy-kun was something out of their league. How right she was. Rias was sweating on the inside. She would look back at this moment and dread what in fresh hell convinced her this was a good idea. But for now however, her mind was focused on the crushing pressure that she suddenly felt. Forced to slump forwards, sweat beaded her forehead and goosebumps rose on her arms. A quick glance around showed her peerage in just a bad or even worse state. The ever-shy Asia had fainted while Issei was flat on his stomach and fighting consciousness. Kiba at some point had lost his grip on the sword and had been forced to his knees. Kaneko, being the most affected by chakra, had already lost consciousness while Akeno was slowly rising to her feet. Rias had never felt such an overwhelming force in her life. And never so close. Her own brother had never saw the need to use his true form in decades, and the most power output she had felt was from Graphia whenever she was angry. What? Rias uttered between gasps. Her breathing was strained and she had to squint to fight against the invisible force crushing her slowly. As soon as it came, it went. Without the crushing weight, Rias fell forward on all fours. Taking in huge gulps of air, Rias was vulnerable when Naruto walked forward and crouched in front of her. Listen to me, Grimori, I don't take kindly to being held against my will. It would be best to remember that. With a small gust of wind and a swirl of leaves, Naruto and his prisoner were gone. Baocho. I don't think that was the wisest decision. Rias could only nod in agreement with her knight. Azazel had never seen an angry Naruto before. An annoyed Naruto due to his pervy antics. Yeah, pies, said Naruto whenever they run out of ramen. Most definitely. But never had Azazel seen Naruto angry before. Until now. When the doors to the apartment flew open with a bang, Azazel jumped in shock. He leader of the fallen angels could feel the anger rolling of the boy in waves as he stomped towards his direction. Upon reaching Azazel, Naruto had thrown the bundle off his shoulders to reveal a man who Azazel vaguely recognized. One of the targets Azazel had sent for. Rough night, brat, Azazel asked as Naruto slumped in a recliner opposite to him. Like you wouldn't believe, Naruto sighed. He was tired, not physically but mentally. First of all, there were 5 fallen angels, not 1. But that just wasn't enough, there had to be 2 devils there too, Ero Tenshi. Azazel ignored Naruto's nickname for him before he processed what his employee had told him. Apparently, the fallen angels were banding together opposed to their every man for themselves tactics, something he would be glad for had they not been strays. But also joining forces with devils, this could prove troublesome in the future. In another dimension, a whole clan of lazy deer herders sneezed at once. Still though, I don't see the problem. I'm sure you could have handled it without a problem, Azazel commented. He had yet to see the full power of Naruto, but he knew for a fact that the boy was far more powerful than him or any of the Saiyans. That was a fact. That wasn't the problem. Naruto began to tell his tale of how he had beaten all 5 fallen angels, killing 4 while capturing the last. He told Azazel about the Grimoire's peerage appearance and their subsequent meeting, which led to Naruto's current mood. At the end, Azazel understood why the boy was so miffed. Personally, he had never met the Grimoire heiress. But if she was anywhere as hard-headed as her brother, he could imagine she would do such a thing. "Ma, you should calm down, Naruto. That anger won't do you any good," Azazel advised. "Plus, I don't the Grimoire girl would do anything like that again, so it's not important anymore." Naruto nodded along with Azazel's logic. It was done and over with, and he had ensured that the girl wouldn't attempt that again. Azazel abruptly stood up. Stretching upwards, he yawned loudly before reaching for the unconscious bundle on the floor. It would appear that the fallen angel had been knocked out from the killing intent released by the blonde wimp. "Well, Naruto, another job well done, brat," Azazel commented before his tone went serious. "I've got another job for you. I can't give you all the details, but I can guarantee that it won't be your typical capture missions." Naruto sat up intrigued. Another job so quickly? And by the sounds of it, a top-secret mission. Sweet. So what I am doing? Azazel reached into his jacket's top pocket before pulling out a piece of paper. Slipping it into Naruto's grasp, he said, "Just go there tomorrow, you'll find out there." Yane, if you were to ask, who exactly was Issei Hyodo, you would get different answers. If you asked his classmates, especially the girls, they would be quick to tell you that the boy was a despicable perv. RT with no redeeming qualities and should burn in the darkest depths of hell. Harsh, but true. If you were to ask his 2 friends Matsuda and Motohama, his brothers in arms in the art of perversion, he would tell you that Issei was nothing more than a fellow believer in the otherworldly charms that was the female form. Again, true, but in actuality, Issei was the definition of average. The boy epitomizes the word normal in all means at one. It was the one area where the boy excelled that led to his social downfall. With his loud, brash and direct personality, many would think that the young male would be relatively popular. Perhaps a few friends here and there. Maybe 1 or 2 girlfriends throughout his life. Sounds reasonable enough, right? Wrong. What made the boy stand out was his insane libido that could match 1,000 unsatisfied men. Yep, that's how horny the dude was. In fact, the only reason the boy was so at ease with his recent reincarnation was due to the possibility of him having an harem. So it was without alarm that when a naked Rias Grimoire had entered his room at night, his mind had short-circuited. He hadn't seen his master since the meeting that they had with the blonde boy. Now, that was an experience. To this point, Issei could not stop the small shivers whenever he thought of the blonde youth. He had seemed so normal when he had spoken to him, but in a split second the boy had them all at his mercy. And Issei didn't like that. He hated being useless. He hated not being able to protect his friends. He had feared the worst when that invisible pressure had sent him to the floor. It reminded him so much of his fight with Rainier, but only 1,000 times worse. It is as that same sense of hopelessness that had struck him when Rainier had killed Asia. As he held the bishop's lifeless body in his arms, he felt as though a crater had been opened in his heart. He didn't want that to happen again. He wouldn't let that happen again. Issei's train of thoughts was derailed when a crimson light lit up his room. When the light show died down, it revealed the form of his new king, Rias Grimoire. But she wasn't exactly herself. BBB Boucho. WW, what are you doing here? The brown-haired pawn barely said. His face had lost all its color and he could barely stop the nosebleed. Why? Because his president was completely naked. While not the first he had seen her naked, this was the first time he truly allowed himself to immerse in the beauty that was her body. Oh sweet merciful, Issei, Rias suddenly spoke up, her tone low, but Issei could actually feel the desperation. Issei sat up on his bed in attention, eyes wide at what he was thinking. Hi Boucho. Rias walked forward. With each step, her majestic mound swayed like a hypnotic pocket watch dangled before his eyes. He was caught in its illusion, helpless to resist. The spell broke when he felt her fingers on his chin. Rias cupped his chin and tilted his head upwards. She knew that this was a long shot. A desperate ploy she hoped she could avoid, but now, she had no choice. She couldn't ask Kiba to do this, he wouldn't go through with it. Her only option now was Issei. She needed him. Now, she needed him to take her virginity. Could you do me a favor? When he nodded, she smiled. He was hooked. Little did they know, a certain silver-haired maid would interrupt their actions. Oh well, when one thinks about beings of unattainable power, how do they imagine them to be? Large, hulking and monstrous, or majestic, strong and glorious? Was the being something modeled of something out of a manga, or would it appear to be humanoid? So many different things that could make someone's imagination run wild. Well, before meeting her new boss, the SS-class stray devil Ku, Roka would imagine that a being of such caliber would be something of the above. How wrong she was. Long black hair styled in split bangs, the Nekomata was exceptionally beautiful. Soft features with amber eyes not unlike her younger sister. She wore a black kimono with red interior and wrapped a golden obi around her waist. The ceremonial dress hung off her shoulder, revealing to the world her smooth skin. But what really stood out were the cat ears and tail she possessed. Currently, the wanted criminal was standing in front of a little girl. Or what appeared to be so. So you want me to head to Kuo? Kuroka asked the smaller girl before her. Yes, the girl answered back monotonously. But why, Nya? Because I felt a strong power appear there. A source which was not there before. You were to retrieve that person for me. The girl ordered. Kuroka inwardly shivered. The girl's gray eyes met her ambers. She felt exposed, bare and vulnerable. Do you know what this person looks like, Nya? No, but you were to retrieve that person for me because I request you to do so. For my peace and quiet to be returned to me, you are to retrieve that being, the girl reasoned, before her eyes narrowed, by any means necessary. Failure is not an option. As you wish, Ophis. Wait, what? Had Issei Hyodo just turned down perversion? No way. Teachers shuddered at the implications of such an action. Surely it wasn't true. The boy who had the libido equivalent to 1,000 men had refused a peak show. Preposterous. Matsuda and Motohama had immediately concluded that the boy before them was an impostor. Why else would he speak such blasphemy? The girls, however, had high hopes. Maybe, just maybe, their precious Kiba senpai had been able to rehabilitate the perverted husk of a boy that called himself Issei. When Rias had flashed into his room by flashing him, did you see what I did there? Because she was naked when she flashed into his room, so she was technically flashing him, get it? Funny, right? Ah, forget it. So you couldn't blame him when he froze up. Especially after her outrageous request. Take my virginity, Issei, huh? Issei stuck his finger in his ears and wiggled them around a bit. There must be something in his ear because he was sure Rias hadn't said what he thought he heard. If so, then that meant she wanted him too. No way. I'm sorry, Boucho. Could you repeat that, because I swore you just asked me to take my virginity, Issei? She said again, this time her tone tightened up a few octaves. She stepped forward and Issei instinctively took a step back. Before he knew it, her hands were on his shoulders and with little effort, she had shoved him onto the bed. Blue-green eyes met muddy brown in a sea of desperation. She flung her hesitations through the window before moving to unbutton his shirt. She had reached the third button when Issei regained his cognitive ability to think and stop the heiress. Grasping her hands with those of his own, Issei pushed her away from him. This couldn't really be happening, could it? What's wrong, Issei? Rias asked. Despite her best efforts, Issei picked up on the anxiety laced in her tone. Don't you want this to happen? Hell yeah. I mean, sure I want this to happen, but I can't, Issei explained while looking everywhere but the naked heiress. He knew the second his eyes caught her impressive saint, his resolve would wither like a plant without water. Somewhere else in his conscience, a voice similar to his own was chastising him for even second-guessing the route to be taken. Damn it, man. Just do the deed already. Seal the deal. She's begging for it. The voice blared. Just shut up. He answered back. Is something wrong, Issei? Am I not good enough for you? Rias asked through fake tears, not that Issei knew that. From his perspective, He saw a beautiful girl crying because he had refused her. He felt a bit hollow for a moment there. He never wanted to see a girl cry. Ever. And he'll do whatever it takes to make it up to her. Which was what Rias was hoping for. She felt horrible for manipulating the boy the way she did. Hadn't it been enough that she had allowed his death for the sole purpose of adding him to her peerage? She had dragged him from his peace of normalcy for her own personal gain with a cheap promise of increased power and multiple partners. At another time, she would question her actions and wonder if there was another way to go that she hadn't explored, but now, she needed the boy to bend to her will. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and Rias Ramori was the epitome of desperate at the moment. Is it me? Am I not attractive enough, Issei? She whimpered, and her heart clenched when she saw the crestfallen look that flashed across Hintwaver now. She hadn't come so far to be stopped by something like morals. No, she resolved to make it up to him later, but now, she needed him to do her. Quite literally, I might add. No, nothing like that, Boucho. You're really pretty and your boobs are amazing, he tried to explain, but the soft whimpering of his president cut him off. He hadn't realized that she had backed him into a corner. Until he stopped to observe their positions. He had his back braced against the wall at the edge of his bed. His shirt was slightly undone by his master and he only wore blue underwear for bottoms. He crimson-haired beauty was as nude as the day she was born, and Issei idly noted that the carpet did indeed match the drapes. Good to know. She was on all fours, slowly crawling towards him in an extremely erotic display that was reminiscent to a lioness on the prowl. Issei would have been defenseless to her charms had it not been for the look in her eyes. He saw neither love nor lust, but anxiety laced with desperation. She looked like a cornered prey in their last moments, their eyes darting left to left searching for something, anything, to save them. Then why, Issei? Why won't you do me this request? Didn't you pledge your loyalty to me? She urged. Are you going to refuse, you master? Why was he making it so hard for her? She had assumed that the boy would jump at the chance to spend a night in her arms. Most boys would. Hell, some had even propositioned her. Of course, Boucho, I would do anything for you. The proclaimed without hesitation. She had saved his life. Ian gave his existence a purpose outside of boobs, of course, but this is something personal, Boucho. Your first time should be special, Boucho. I can't take that away from you. Rias stared at the boy as her frustration level rose. She couldn't fault the boy for his logic and was slightly touched that he had thought to put her feelings over his, but damn it, when a girl tells you she wants you to bang her, the only way to go is to drop your pants and bang her. No questions asked. She closed her eyes to compose herself. She hadn't expected the boy to have such a strong moral compass about said topic, but she was no quitter. By the end of the night she would no longer have her innocence, that she swore. I don't care about stuff like that, Issei. I want you to be my first, so please, take my virginity. Issei gulped. He could feel his walls crumpling by the minute. Any restraint he had against the buxom heiress was slowly slipping away with each ticking second. He leaned in close as she did. He couldn't stop himself. He felt like a helpless metal being drawn towards a magnet as he dove into the endless pool of blue-green. He had always focused on her hair, that he hadn't noticed how her eyes seemed to sparkle. Even here in the dark. He wondered how her lips could feel like. He imagined them as soft and sweet and enticing. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you ask. A bright light brought the room to life. A teleportation circle appeared in his room, and from it, a silver-haired beauty appeared. Walking towards the Orc Club room, Issei was oblivious to the saint Ares he drew his way as his mind ran 100 miles per hour. After the weirdly dressed silver-haired woman had arrived in his room, she had immediately ignored Issei's presence, instead focusing on Rias. The woman had scolded Rias for her nudity before giving her appropriate clothes to wear. Initially belittling Issei's status, the roles were turned when Rias had taken to scolding the newcomer for her judgment on Issei. The way they spoke and the fact that the woman was undoubtedly a devil told Issei that both parties were acquainted. The woman, who Issei had come to know was named Graphia, had explained that she came with the sole purpose of putting a stop to Rias' actions. She had then gone on to explain that she had expected that the heiress would have attempted such a nefarious SCH. And on the instructions of Rias' older brother. Again something Issei didn't know about Rias, she was to keep guard of the crimson-haired beauty for the night. As both female went into an argument that intensified with each ticking second, the brunette of the trio was completely lost. He had been able to conclude that Rias' presence in his room was not something she had done on a whim but was in fact planned. But, if what Grafia had said was anything to go by, Rias' family had clear objections against her schemes to the point where they had sent a servant of the Grimoire household to intervene. Issei sighed. There was no way he would be able to figure this all out until she told him what truly was going on. Since their meeting with the blonde boy, she had a sort of resigned aura about her. Her responses were slow and her usually wit seemed half-assed, as though she was troubled. Did the blonde had anything to do with Rias' current mood? That would make sense seeing that the mood swing hadn't started until the boy had refused to answer Rias' questions. Man, all this thinking is making my head hurt, Issei thought as he pushed open the door of the club. Greeting him was he tense atmosphere as all of the peerage members seemed on edge. Asia had immediately made her way to Issei's side at his entrance while Kiba gave a small nod to the boy which he returned. A quick glance around the room told Issei all that he needed to know. Rias was seated behind her desk, her elbows propped up and her hands interlocked in front of her face. The vice president of the club wore a solemn expression as she stood in her position to the left of the king piece. Kaneko was in her usual spot on the couch but she was without her regular snack as the girl glared heatedly at the ground. Kiba stood rigid in his spot behind the couch, a tense look in his eyes. The odd one out was Grafia, the same person Issei had met the night before. The woman seemed to be in a world of her own as she seemingly ignored the unusual tension with a graceful smile on her face. Issei noted that the woman had the elegance of that one would expect from nobility. Her striking silver mane was as exotic as Rias' crimson hair. Long braids framed her face while the back was left to flow to her back in twin braids. With eyes that shone as bright and silvery as the moon, the maid observed Issei's arrival with a small smile. "If I may, milady, I request to speak freely," Grafia commented to the seated heiress. Rias waved her hand nonchalantly, signaling Grafia that she may continue. "Thank you. Seeing that everyone is here, I believe it would be." Whatever it was that she was about to say was interrupted as the temperature in the room suddenly spiked. Issei watched with mild curiosity as Rias' face morphed into a scowl as the room was illuminated by golden glow as a teleportation circle flickered to life. The magical seal spewed flames as golden tendrils lashed at their feet while the flames grew into an inferno. A single figure stood in the midst of it all unscathed. As the flames died in a glorious burst, the figure sighed before turning towards the group. He spoke. "I, Riser Phoenix, have arrived in the human world." There were certain times during his short tenure working for Azazel when Naruto would stop and think, why the hell did I agree to this? At first glance, Azazel made for an intimidating figure. He was taller than most men his age, and his hair colors made most humans believe the man was probably in cahoots with some sort of gang. This misconception was shared by the supernatural world as well. When most supernatural beings heard of the Governor-General of Grigori, they would immediately think of a monstrous creature with capabilities on par with a Satan. Someone who had fought against the likes of God and the four original Satans alike and lived to tell the tale. And while Naruto knew that Azazel's infamy amongst his peers was valid, he held no such feelings for the man. Reasons being, he was far superior in strength and combat. While not as smart or experienced as the fallen angel, one did not fight a being of one by being weak. The second reason Naruto didn't fear the likes of Azazel was because the man acted like an idiot whenever the urge hit him. And this usually was at the expense of Naruto's patience. Just like now, Naruto drummed his fingers along the wooden counter he sat behind. The bronze door chimes swayed in the light breeze and the tiny flaps at the entrance brought a sense of nostalgia that reminded the blonde of a certain ramen shop back in Konoha. He had oftentimes caught himself reminiscing on the past, and wondering how the villages had moved on after the war and if they had achieved peace. He could never forget his old friends. Yet he knew life moved on and his was no longer tied to the elemental nations. He sat on a red-cushioned stool as the Ravenet ramen chef prepared a large bowl of miso ramen in the kitchen. This would make it his 8th bowl. having arrived about an hour ago. Whoever it was that Azazel had agreed for him to meet was running extremely late. He hoped for their sake they had a good excuse, and it better not include black cats and or the road of life. He had dealt with enough of that for one lifetime. The low thudding of approaching footsteps shook Naruto from his train of thoughts. Someone slid onto the stood next to him. Another one of whatever he's having, the newcomer sounded to the chef. The woman stuck her head out from the kitchen to flash both men with a smile. Sure thing. Coming right up, sir. She grinned before heading back to work. As Naruto turned to face the intruder, he was struck with the strangest case of déjà vu as he tried his hardest to try and remember. Where exactly had he met the man before? The man looked awfully familiar that Naruto felt like kicking himself if he wasn't about to tell who this man was. The man was dressed in a navy blue jacket, suit with a bright green tie that oddly blended well together. He was roughly a head taller than the shinobi with broad shoulders and lean muscles that rippled beneath his clothes. A narrowed gaze observed the man as he returned the favor, his blue-green eyes scanning the boy with no haste. But it was the distinctive locks of crimson hair that fell meticulously from his head that gave the clue as to who the man was. Searsx Lucifer. Now that he had seen the man, Naruto could easily see the family resemblance between the leader of the devils and the Grimoire girl. He would even go as far to saw why that Searsx looked like a male version of Rias Grimoire. Hell, the both of them have an ahoge that stood out like a cherry stem. And given their hair color, that wasn't so hard to imagine. The TWO men fell into a comfortable silence as both men had varying reactions to the meeting. Searsx was whistling a small tune as he waited patiently for the chef to come with his order. He was the image of calm and reserved as he chuckled lightly at a joke he remembered he had told his son not too long ago. The shinobi, however, was slightly panicked. And reasonably so. He was never one for politics. Something he had planned to pawn off to Shikamaru if he were to become Hokage. But there was one thing he did know, was that when a leader of a country, or race, in this case, went out of his way to meet up with you, it was either one of the two possibilities. 1. You had done something that had offended them and or his people. In that case, said leader was usually the one to bring about swift justice on the offender. The second most likely theory was that the leader wanted your services to aid them in a task at hand. It was something he was used to at this point in time. Countless of times, he had been tasked with security details of several daimyos and lords, but he was certain that this man did not need the aid of a bodyguard, seeing that he was a super devil, a title and status only given to few others. So if that wasn't that, why had the man requested the meeting? Quite delicious, isn't it? Searsx asked with the slightest of smiles. Naruto regarded the man's question only for a moment to realize what the man had meant. Sometime during his mini brainstorm, the lovely ramen chef had brought both men their respective meals before dashing back into the kitchen to do who knows what. Sighing to himself that he had grown so paranoid that he had neglected the heaven sent that was ramen, the teenager followed his companions by breaking the two chopsticks apart not before a quick "itadakimasu." Diving headfirst into the divine meal, Naruto felt the hidden tension flow from his body, but yet he was still wary of what the man might pull off. Inwardly he hoped that this meeting wouldn't come to blows. He would hate to have the splendid shop destroyed in the crossfire. "How old are you, Naruto Dono?" the man asked offhandedly. The question had come as a bit of a surprise foe. The teen male as he paused to stare at the man with a few noodles hanging from his mouth. He quickly slurped down the flaccid ingredients as he turned to regard the man. He was gazing at the blonde with an expression he just could not point a finger at. Respect and acceptance, Naruto concluded. Why, however, was this man treating him with such reverence? He was a brat when compared to the man's own age, he knew that. Naruto, while not knowing the man's precise age, knew him to be far older than he looked. Added to the fact that the man had been there to fight against the old Satan faction was evidence to the man's longevity. So why would someone far more reputable than the blonde regard him in such a manner? Naruto. Just Naruto. I would prefer it if you addressed like that, Lucifer-san. I was never one for formalities. Naruto responded. Then I would hope that you would do the same and just call me Searsx, the man answered as he slurped another dose of the noodles. But you have yet to answer my question, Naruto. How old are you? I just turned 17 a few weeks ago. Interesting, Sears X murmured almost to himself. Naruto saw the calculating look on the man's face and felt slightly unnerved. He looked so much like his sister, yet the man had complete confidence that his plan would have worked if given time. To be so young and yet powerful, it is no wonder Azazel had taken to boasting about. You. Naruto blushed at the compliment and went to scratch the back of his neck on instinct. Thank you, sir. It's only the truth. However, I am here on business. As you should know, there was a recent incident that involved my sister and her peerage, a group of fallen angels and stray exorcists and a holy maiden. During the fight, all opposing sides were decimated at the hands of the peerage and my younger sister. After that, she had revived a holy maiden of the church, someone who was affiliated, however loosely, to the angel faction. This had sparked a few tensions within all the factions, and it was only through Azazel's report of hiring yourself to capture the strays. Naruto nodded along with the man, not seeing where this conversation was heading. But as of late, several devils have also decided to abandon the faction and are using their powers in nefarious schemes to fulfill their own sick desires. I understand, sir, but what does this have to do with me? I've already cleared it with Azazel, so all I need is your okay. How would you like a part-time job? Things never seem to stop getting interesting. On the outskirts of Kuo, the slight rustling of the leaves as the trees danced a waltz with the wind was all that could be heard. The small forest animals scurried hurriedly along the forest floor, ending to their separate habitats as the moon bathed the area in a pool of silver allure. It was a scenic night, the twinkling of the stars matching the man-made lights that flickered in and out of existence in the city. Below gave the small town a relaxing appeal, but the focus of our attention paid no mind to his surroundings. No, he couldn't afford the time. His master, how he hated calling that lunatic that, had given him a job, and he was on his way back to tell him of a job well done. A feral grin threatened to split his face as he anticipated the sheer sea when their plans came to fruition. The heavens will be split asunder, and the gates of hell will be unleashed, in the only middle ground between the two, their fated battleground, being the human realm. He could already taste the fear of the pesky humans as there were. LD crumbled to ashes before their very eyes as beasts that were thought only to be figment of imagination wreak havoc to their world. Yes, he would endure serving that man for now, if it meant a war between the factions. And the best part of it all, no one will see it coming until it was too late. With those thoughts in mind, He-Man flew faster, his leathery wings propelling him closer to his goal. He became a blur in the dim sky as his dark clothing helped hide his presence. Suddenly, he felt a crushing force slammed into him from above and forced him to veer off course. The man fell into a steep nosedive, only righting himself as he reached near the peak of the trees below him. He hovered in the air, his violet eyes darting back and forth, side to side and up and below in search of the presence. He had only felt it for a moment, but the intense bloodlust rattled him to the core. Not even his new master, a man known and feared for his intense battle presence, could produce such an intense feeling, and that thought brought a cold sweat to the nape of his neck. A rustle. He spun on his heels and a magical circle shimmered to life as the man fired a torrent of flames in the direction of the sound, burning a number of trees to charred wood. Yet, the presence was still there. He could feel its eyes peering at him through the darkness, watching him, mocking him. If he wasn't sure he was being played with before, the resounding laughter that seemed to echo from all around him verified his thoughts. A swell of anger boiled to the surface, turning his pale face to a tomato red. "Show yourself, coward," he yelled in response. The laughter died, yet that only made the situation all the more scarier. He began to steadily build up his magic reserves, evident by the red aura slowly consuming his figure. He knew whatever it was that attacked him must be strong, but he refused to back from the challenge. He was high-class devil, his pride wouldn't allow for retreat. Deciding that the silence was worse than the laughter, he spoke again. "Come on and face me, coward. Or will you hide in the shadows?" He baited, hoping that the man chose to show himself that he at least had a target to shoot at. For a few tense moments, nothing happened, having the man believe that his attacker would stay in shadows and strike him down. But that was not to be. Blood-red eyes glared at the man. Black slits cut through the crimson sclera like a fox. Fierce, wild yet intelligent. The man knew these eyes could only belong to one type of supernatural beings he had no love for. Yokai. The man sneered lowly as the aura around began to swirl in a frenzy. Wrong, the not yokai answered back to the man's incorrect assumptions. I'm no yokai, the attacker continued, I'm something a lot worse. The figure slowly emerged from the shadows, revealing hair as bright as the sun. A teenaged visage filled out the animalistic eyes, and 3 jagged whiskers on each cheek seemed to widen and darken with each passing second. The teen was about the same height as the man, perhaps an inch or two shorter. He was garbed in black jeans and an orange shirt. Thrown over this a red jacket that reached his shin with black flame motifs licking at the coattail. He looked at the man with barely concealed disdain, something that pissed the man off to no ends. What is this? A child? All past F. Ears off, his attacker withered and was gone in the wind as he realized who it was that had attacked him. His aura dimmed and vanished as though it wasn't there to begin with. He was appalled that such a young child would dare strike out against him. What was up with this generation? Were they so foolhardy to think that they could stand up against their superiors in one-on-one combat, that they would attack a man of his caliber? Well, if he wanted a fight, he would oblige the boy before slowly grinding him into paste. Well, boy, do you have any ideas who you've challenged? The man asked with a smirk. Believe me, I know. Oh, do you now? Issei Koble, a high-class and formerly the Rook of Manuval, the high-class devil, before you killed him and the rest of your peerage members and fled from hell. Now considered an A-ranked criminal. Wanted for his treachery, the teen said to the now identified Issei, his cold eyes now seemingly glowing with rage as he listed the informati he had uncovered on the stray devil in front of him. The criminal raised a brow at the teen. The teen obviously knew of him, or at least, his actions. He knew that he was capable of taking out an entire peerage in combat, yet he still decided to fight him. Maybe he was seeking to boost her reputation by beating him. Something he could respect, if the boy hadn't chosen him as his target. You obviously know of me, boy. So why don't you just go on home? I don't have time to waste on pests like yourself, the man spat, before unfurling his wings and flying off into the night. Or at least that was the plan, until the heel of a sandal crashed into from above and sent himself careening to the floor. Issei gritted his teeth in anger and he stood up and stumbled for a moment, regaining his bearings. His head ached like a bitch from the axe kick. He glared up towards the figure that was the reason for his delay to his master, but now, the report was at the back of his mind. Right now, he had a blonde to kill. All right, boy, you've got my attention. He cracked his neck, and I'll make you regret that kick. With that, he blasted off towards the branch the boy was perched on, only to feel a resounding crunch as the boy ducked beneath his fists at the last moment and land a devastating punch to his chest. He slammed into a tree before going through it and falling to the forest floor in heap. He struggled to his knees, coughing up blood as he managed to rise to his feet again. He winced as he felt his ribs. Yep, definitely broken. Issei stopped to observe his opponent again, noting that the boy had barely moved when he had swung and still managed to pack a good punch. He smirked. Perhaps the boy wasn't all bark and no bite. You pack a mean hook, boy, Issei commented in a rare moment of admiration. Before he narrowed his gaze and his aura returned with a vengeance, but that is nothing before my might. He thrust both hands forward as a magic circle appeared. Red-hot flames flared and roared as they raced towards the blonde. The sheer heat burnt any leaf it came into contact with to ashes. Soon enough, the boy was enveloped by the inferno. Ha! What good is strength if you can't hit me? The man roared in laughter, believing the fight to be over and done with. My flames are as hot as those of the Phoenix clan. You picked the wrong devil to fight, the man boasted. Before he sputtered as the blonde he believed he had burnt to a crisp appeared before him in a show of speed that his eyes couldn't track. Pain, unadulterated pain. One moment, he had won the fight and was boasting over his opponent's charred corpse, the next he was sent soaring by an uppercut. Reaching the apex of his impromptu flight, he had no time to counter as the blonde appeared in front of him and with a vicious punch sent him back towards the forest floor. Issei rolled and skipped like a stone before finally settling at the base of a tree. His entire being felt on fire and he was sure he had broken a few more bones. Not one to be deterred, despite the fact he was getting his ass handed to him by a kid centuries younger than he was. Jiraiya rose again, wiping the blood off his mouth and grinned. So you've got quite a speed on you too. That just made this all the more exciting. His battle lust jumped to new heights. Yes, this was it. This was what he wanted. What he longed for. Hi's opportunity for glory was robbed from him when that upstart devil Searsex had thought it was better than fight to the finish. But now, with their plans, it's only a matter of time before the Second Great War was sparked. And he would get to face more opponents like this. His visage morphed to that of a savage beast. His body hissed as steam wafted off his form. He could feel it, the pent-up aggression he had suppressed for hundreds of years slowly leaking out. The air stank of its scent, the foul aroma of death. Come now, boy, prove your worth and sat my desire. Jiraiya shot into the sky with newfound speed and stopped a few feet above the forest. He raised both hands above his head and a magic seal about the size of 5 school buses appeared. I hope you survive this. It would be truly disappointing if you don't. The circle glowed menacingly, and whatever it was, the teen knew he shouldn't take it head on. With that in mind, he crouched while orange pigments faded into place around his eyes. He breathed, in, out, now. When he saw the stray devil grunting with effort, he knew he had to act. As a tsunami of flames was released from the seal, the blonde narrowed his gaze. The flames merged and morphed to form the terrifying visage of a roaring dragon, descending on its prey with its mouth wide open. As it neared the blonde, Jiraiya smirked, thinking it was all over. He was wrong. With speeds far too fast to be tracked, the blonde leapt from harm's way. His movements nothing more than a flash of yellow. He reappeared right beside Jiraiya with his fingers crossed. In familiar fashion and a certain phrase at the tip of his tongue. Shadow clone jutsu, was all he said as 4 other copies of the blonde popped into existence. The fist of the first clone smashed into his cheek, sending the devil sprawling through the air. He knew that his jaw had shattered under the force of the punch, but he had no time to contemplate on his injuries. He suddenly keeled over forwards. A knee from the second clone was now painfully embedded into his gut. He spat up blood, and saliva from the sheer force of the hit, and dark spots converged on the edges of his vision. The third clone wasted no time, sending him upwards with a vicious mule kick to the chest, his ribs cracking. He had lost vision in one of his eyes, not that it would make a difference in this fight. No, this wasn't a fight. A fight would imply he had a chance to begin with. No, this was a beatdown. The fourth and final clone made its presence with an uppercut that caused Jiraiya's head to snap upwards. Unfortunately, all this did was give him a better view of the original blonde menace descending on his form in a pin, before his left leg lashed out to execute a perfect axe kick. Naruto barrage. He shot to the ground like a comet falling from the sky. He landed hard. His crash landing uprooted the earth and formed a giant crater, with him smack dab in the middle of it all. The trees and foliage around him were ablaze, no doubt caused by his own attack. Yet, he paid no attention to his surroundings. He only had eyes for the blonde walking towards him as casual as song. Anyone would pass on the street without a second glance. Reaching the devil, the teen hauled him to his feet by his hair, dragging him out of the crater before he slung the devil over his shoulder. The last words Jiraiya heard before drifting off was the low whisper of the blonde. Searsex has some questions for you, so I can't have you die on me now. Issei Hyodo slumped against a tree. His breathing was haggard and heavy. Sweat beaded against his forehead, which he wiped away with the back of his hand. He was on his last legs, he knew that. His muscles screamed out for mercy, yet he paid them no mind. Opting to eye the path of destruction laying before him. A straight path was burnt through the forest he was currently in. Trees were scorched, and ripped from their roots. The lush green grass was gone, burnt to crisps. This was the product of his strongest attack. Dragon shot. Yet, he wasn't pleased. He fell to his knees, his legs no longer able to support his weight. His brown hair was comparable to bird's nest, and the small twig lodged in there only helped the imagery. His white shirt, once pristine and immaculate, was now ripped and torn and slashed in all manner of ways. Was result of his morning spar against Kiba. One thing he learnt from that fight was that Kiba was never truly disarmed. Sword birth was a pain in the ass. His trousers were no better. The black SL axe that once reached his ankles were no shin length, courtesy of the barrage of lightning attacks thrown his way by the sadistic vice president. Attack after attack was thrown at him with no mercy or pattern. The self-proclaimed pervert had been dancing and weaving and fumbling around the entirety of the afternoon trying to avoid being burnt to crisps from the attacks. It didn't help that Akino was getting off on his pain. And don't get him started on his sparring sessions with Kaneko. He had known about the Rook's enhanced strength, he had come prepared. But seeing and feeling the limits of her strength were two entirely different things. The ivory-haired loli had systematically broken the teen to tiny little pieces before having Asia heal him just for the process to repeat itself. He inked as he remembered the phantom pain of having his ribs broken and shattered to 1,000 little pieces. He had come here with the intention of becoming strong enough to be able to help the peerage in their upcoming battle. Ever since that obnoxious Phoenix had made his appearance in the club room, Issei's days had come and gone in a whirlwind. Rias had immediately sent all the peerage members home to pack for their 10-day training trip. The arrogant bastard had the nerve to imply that even with all the training they could squeeze into the small intermission, they would still be unable to contest against him. And for some reason, Issei was slighted to believe him. He had seen the disapproving looks Rias had sent the group when they thought he wasn't looking. She knew the extent of the riser's prowess. And if she still believed that they weren't strong enough, Issei was inclined to believe her. That was why he was here today. It was the last day of the trip and most of the peerage members had turned in for the night. In preparations for tomorrow's event, all but one, he had sneaked out into the woodlands surrounding the house, in order to gain some last-minute training. Breathing loudly while sweat dripped off his forehead onto the grass, Issei finally collapsed from exhaustion, rolling onto his back to stare at the bountiful stars in the night sky. He lifted his left hand to his face, observing the blood-red gauntlet that adorned his limb. A true work of art. Dragon scales that were seemingly dyed in the blood of its foes, the sacred gear held a large green gem that encompasses majority of the back of his palm. He knew there was more power that this sacred gear granted. There had to be. It was one of the Longinus, said to be able to give man the power to topple gods. It was up to him to unleash the potential within the gauntlet. But how? It wasn't as though the blasted thing came with a manual or nice night, don't ya think? A voice suddenly spoke, breaking Issei from his contemplation. Issei tensed, and cursed under his breath for draining himself to such an extent that he could barely stand. With no way to defend himself, whoever it was that had found him could finish him off with ease. And he wouldn't put it past Riser to send someone to make him disappear, to have an easier to his lovely president. But if Riser thought he was gonna go down easier, then that bastard had another coming. Whoa, calm down Gaki, I come in peace, the voice said again, this time closer and familiar, yet Issei just couldn't place it. Okay, so whoever it was Issei had probably met him before, and he did say he came in peace. Perhaps he was someone the president had keeping an eye over the peerage. With that thought in mind, he relaxed back into the grass while the person approached. Not a moment later, he could hear steady footsteps approach stopping beside him. The grass crunched as the person took a seat beside him, and soon enough, Issei heard weird slurping sounds. Curiosity getting the better of him, Issei turned to face his companion, and to say he was shocked was an understatement. This was the last person he had expected to see. Yu Uzumaki-san, Issei squeaked out in surprise and slight fear. Ever since their last meeting with the blonde unknown, which his president had tried to strong-arm the teen into answering her questions, the teen in question had become sort of a boogeyman for Issei and Asia. He could remember the dreadful pressure the boy had unleashed on them, and in that moment, Issei had saw himself die multiple times. Not Samet, he would wish upon his worst enemies. So to see his personal boogeyman lounging beside him nonchalantly slurping on some noodles, his fight-or-flight instincts kicked in. And he was leaning towards flight. Fortunately, Naruto decided to remedy the situation the only way he knew how. Through his smiles. Yo, Naruto greeted back, his eyes snapped closed and a grin at his lips. Kinda late for you to be out here, don't ya think? Naruto questioned with a small tilt of the head. Opening his eyes again, Naruto was pleased to see the fears at the back of the brunette's eyes fade and was replaced with curiosity. It was a good start. He internally mused. I was just out training, Issei answered with a slight stutter, slowly getting over the fact that the blonde was not here to finish him off or any like that. In fact, Issei had the sense that he and the blonde, Naruto, he remembered his name, could get along well. But Issei also knew he wasn't exactly the best judge of character. His light with Rainier was evidence to this statement. Training all night, huh? I can dig that, the blonde responded before inhaling a large amount of ramen before setting the bowl aside. So, whatcha training for? Huh, whatcha training for? Naruto repeated, while standing up and dusting off his pants. Everyone who trains does it for a reason. So tell me, Issei Hyodo, why do you train? Naruto asked, his tone suddenly changing from the aloof and careful manner it was when he had just arrived to something more somber and oddly authoritative. Issei had opted to ignore the fact that Naruto had addressed by both his first and last name, but focused on the question the shinobi had asked him. Why do you train? Why was he doing this? Was it because of his gratitude towards Rias for saving his life when Rainier had killed him in their date? Maybe it was due to the fact that she had taken him in, gave him a family and friends he could call his own. Yeah, that was it. She had given him everything he had now. Before she came into his life, Issei had gone about life going through the motions. He had no set goals. But now, he had persons to strive for, to fight for, and damn it, there was no way in hell he was going to let some uptight, arrogant shit-stain take Rias' virginity. That belonged to him. On his pride as the future harem king, Rias was his to have and behold. I train to protect what's dear to me, to become strong enough so that I can protect my family and become harem king. Issei answered, his voice and conviction going with each word, until he was standing again, with his fist raised in the sky and fire burning deep with his eyes. Naruto smiled. The boy had potential and his intentions were pure. If you decided to forget the whole harem king part, this was the type of person he could respect. Those who would travel the fine line of life and death, storm the gates of hell and face all odds if it meant that their precious ones were safe. Yep, he could respect Issei Hyodo. A person is able to become truly strong when they wish to protect someone they cherish. Issei, right now, you have persons you wish to protect and I promise you, I'll make you strong enough to protect them all. Naruto promised. And Naruto Uzumaki never breaks his promises. In a different time and place, Issei Hyodo would not have met Naruto Uzumaki. But here, in this world, he did. Issei would become truly strong, and Riser never saw it coming. Rias Gramori had a glare that could kill a man 1,000 times over. Her beautiful features were twisted in a sinister sneer at the man standing opposite her. Her crimson locks flared and waved menacingly. Dark energy steamed off her form as her power of destruction was activated, all in the vain efforts of annihilating Riser Phoenix. Behind her, atop the roof there were situated on, her loyal bishop Asia Argento bravely withstood the flaring urge to run from behind her master's shadow and throw herself in harm's way. Why, you may ask? Perhaps it had to do with the fact that in front of them, a mere 10 feet away, was the most gruesome and heart-wrenching sight the girl could ever come to witness. Her heart ached in pain with every blow, every punch and every kick the boy who had saved her life had to endure. Issei Hyodo was getting his ass kicked. He couldn't counter Riser's blows. He was too tired and weak from his last fights, and Riser knew this, and exploited this. Riser grabbed Issei by the shoulders before burying his knees into the boy's chest, causing him to cough up blood, before tossing him away like last week's trash. Issei skipped like a rock across a water surface, before coming to a stop at Rias' feet. Yet, he refused to stay down. With each punch, he rose again. With each kick, he rose again. And just like before, he was rising again. Rias' heart burst. She had caused this. She had done this to him. She had taken away his normal life. It was her who allowed the fallen angels to kill him. It was her who had reincarnated the boy against his, was her who forced him to train and fight for her sake when he owed her nothing. Before she had meddled with his life, he was normal. He wouldn't ever had to endure what the supernatural life had forced him through. He wasn't meant for this life yet, she was the one who carried him here. All to help clean up her problems. She was the only one to blame. Please, Issei, stop, she whispered as she tried to cradle him in her arms. Rias laughed at the display. It was what the boy deserved, believing he could have challenged him. A phoenix. It was absurd. Issei, please. For me, just give up. Issei shook her off him, before he stood on his own 2 feet. He was slumped over, one eye swollen shut and his clothes were in tatters. Yet, he felt alive. He'd never felt better before in his life. A surge of energy was rushing through his system, willing him forward. Onward. One step was followed by another in drunken fashion. He couldn't help it, but he suddenly started laugh. Small titters grew to full-blown laughter. Give up. No, you, trying to make me give up. I've never felt better in my whole life. Boost. I'll never give up. Boost. I'll never stand down. Boost. I'll never quit. Boost. Because, just like him. Boost. Just like him. They called me a failure. Boost. I'll prove them wrong. Balance breaker. Crimson aura fell from the skies and drowned the teen in its bloody glory. It bubbled and writhed and shook, searing the tiles of the roof the teen stood on. A primal roar shook the grow. Oons and the building collapsed under its ferocity. Rias grabbed Asia and shot into the air to escape the destruction. Rias stood, unafraid as Issei changed before his very eyes. His gauntlet evolved, slowly creeping up his arms, and before long, his entire being was a picture of crimson armor. Emerald green eyes shone with anger and a tail flicked occasionally, anxious of what was to occur next. Another roar was unleashed, this time blowing Rias away. The phoenix devil crashed into a tree headfirst. He gathered his bearings groggily only to see a fist smash into his face, sending him back to the tree and through it. Another roar told Rias that his opponent was attacking yet again. He dodged the first punch that sailed millimeters to the left of his face, but the knee to the gut was unavoidable. He BNG leg, giving Issei a clear shot at his exposed back. He was lifted off the ground and held over the devil's head before being slammed brutally back into the dirt. For Rias, the world was a blur of color, sound and pain. He didn't know why, but the punches hurt more than they should have. He could feel his bruises steaming and he hissed with each blow, a stinging pain making his movements slow and sluggish. In the end, he found himself looking up at the artificial sky created for the raiding games. He couldn't move, his body wouldn't respond. How? He questioned in disbelief. A moment ago, he was winning and Rias was guaranteed to be his bride. But now, he had lost. And he knew it. As an answer, he saw Issei unclench his crimson fists, revealing a small silver cross. No wonder. My regeneration can't save you from the effects of holy substances, Issei finished for the phoenix, his tone lower and gruffer. It's over. Rias phoenix has retired. The winner. Rias Grimori. Issei paid the announcement no mind. The fatigue from using his balance breaker while holding a holy cross caused him to collapse and faint from the exhaustion, unknowingly falling right into Rias' awaiting bust. The last thought that filtered through his mind was how he was going to thank a certain blonde shinobi. Searsex was happy. His sister was free from her loveless engagement. She had gained a really powerful piece. And he had secured a new ally for his race. There was nothing that could ruin this moment. This thought only lasted as long as he stepped inside his private study. Waiting for him was a certain blonde he had hired to help track down and interrogate the recent devils who went stray. And by that look on his face, he had found out something big. We need to talk, Naruto said calmly, and Searsex knew that his day had just gotten far worse. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.